Hello everybody, welcome to another video from us. This one is a not actually a live stream podcast or anything, so don't worry you didn't miss anything if you're watching this now. This is our Computex coverage. Going to be a pretty long video. We've got a lot to go over.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've tried to pretty much capture everything from Computex, or as close as we could to it. So I mean our doc is like 3 times longer than normal.
A little bit.
Yeah, but we've got a lot of rapid fire topics and stuff like that, and this pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a big deal. So I guess we'll just start off with, of course, some of the biggest topics of the week. So Intel did a few interesting things. Yeah, so they announced a limited edition 5 gigahertz CPU.
The 8086K was rumored beforehand.
Yeah, there was a lot of talks about it maybe being an 8-core with like 16 threads to compete better with AMD. No, it is just a 6-core limited edition CPU. It is quite literally an 8700K with a higher boost clock, which we all know the 8700K, pretty much all of them can hit 5 gigahertz anyway.
Yeah.
They're only selling 50,000 units, and they gave away 8,086 of them, which is pretty cool. That's actually a big deal. That's a big giveaway.
Especially when you're only selling 50,000. They gave away almost 20%
of their entire stock
to what they're going to be selling. Yeah.
Pretty amazing there. No, not as far as I know. I didn't win one. Did you even enter?
No.
Oh, man. You should have, and then given it to me.
No.
So, anyway, but yeah, so 8086K, it's kind of cool. Some people will buy it for nostalgia purposes. I honestly don't think it's going to sell that well.
I think it'll sell all 50,000.
Well, yes, I think they'll sell all 50,000, but what I mean is, like, very quickly, because they're not, like, sold out already. Yeah. So, I think it'll because, like, why would you spend an extra $100 on literally the same CPU?
Yeah, it's literally a collector's item.
Yeah, I guess so, because, I mean, it's literally it's a different name for the same thing. So anyway, that was some news, but we won't go into much more detail on that, because it really is just an 8700K with a different name and a higher boost clock. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, the Optane 905P. That's been around for a while. We talked about it in another podcast. Really, really interesting SSD there. I have a 900p myself. 905p is a little bit faster, better controller, and some other things like that. Well, interestingly enough, Intel released the 905p in an M.2 form factor. Now, there's a catch, and I'll get to that in a moment, but first time we're seeing proper high-capacity M.2 form factor Optane memory. It is a 380 gigabyte part, which is pretty substantial. Appears to have a newer, higher-end 7-channel controller. It's pretty much the same thing, though, as the 7-channel controller on the current one. It's just shrunk down enough to fit on an M.2 form factor. It probably produces a lot of heat, though, which is interesting. And it probably consumes almost the entire 7-watt power delivery limit that M.2 form factor has, which is pretty shitty for laptops, honestly. So, yeah, there's that, whereas the other ones are probably going to consume more power and perform better because they have access to tons of wattage if needed because they're PCIe or U.2 based, so they have SATA power in that case.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive for a small form factor, but like I said, there's a catch. It's running the M.2 22110 form factor rather than the standard 2280 form factor. So it means it's 110 millimeters long instead of 80 millimeters long, which basically results in this fitting in exactly 0 laptops.
That they might have intended that.
Okay, maybe. But the other issue is most boards don't have a 2210 slot.
Yeah.
Or 22110 slot. And if they do have a 22110 slot, it's only one of them. And so, like, in situations where people aren't running on the really high-end boards that are more likely to have it, or maybe the boards that have the M.2 drive sticking up, they're not going to be able to fit this drive in their system. So it's really going to limit sales. And I guess the issue comes down to why have the M.2 form factor version that won't fit most boards when every board can accept the PCIe version. Unless you're in a case situation where you're using ribbon cables and you only have one, GPU, or you use up all your PCIe slots with your GPU, such as on an ITX system or an MATX system with like
But how many of those especially have the 22110 slot?
Yeah, exactly. None of them will. So it's like, I don't think they're going to really sell any of these, especially if the performance is lower. It's like, oh yeah, I will spend more on a board that supports the 22110 form factor so that I don't use the PCIe slots in the board that will be faster if you get a 905p PCIe. So I think it's kind of a pointless product, honestly. They really shouldn't have released this until they could get it down to the 2280 form factor. But as we'll hear from the next topic here, Intel really likes headlines of articles. So when all the headlines of articles say 905p M.2 form factor, everybody clicks on it and gets excited and goes, Intel's doing this.
Yeah.
They could maybe have made like a 280 gigabyte version at the 2280 form factor. That would be fine. I don't know why they had to go with the 380 gigabyte version. 280 is fine for boot. And there's a ton of over provisioning on these chips. Like my 900p, it has a like 20% over provisioning. So it's actually like almost 400 gigabytes or a little over 400 gigabytes. But of course you can't use all that. A little bit frustrating in my mind. I think it's pretty much pointless.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just dumb. And if they didn't want it in laptops because they were worried about power consumption, another option would be make it a 2280 form factor one, but make it a little bit thicker so it doesn't fit as well in laptops or something like that. Okay, so next topic. Intel announced a 28-core 5 gigahertz CPU coming in Q4,
That's
guys.
so amazing.
I know. I can't believe that they just had this big like revolution where they just took this huge step in the direction of like innovation. It's mind-blowing. They went from having chips that are running like 16 cores, struggling to go over like 3.5 gigahertz on all cores, to all of a sudden 5 gigahertz on all cores with 28 cores. They clearly are investing a lot of money in this, except for the fact that it's an overclocked chip, and they didn't mention it was overclocked and also running on a sub-ambient 1,000 watt cooler.
Oh, you mean they forgot to mention that?
They forgot to mention that it was overclocked, and they forgot to mention that it was running on a very well hidden chiller that was running at sub-ambient, likely negative temperatures in the realm of like negative 10 or 20 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
So it kind of doesn't exist. Basically, we're going to be getting a 28-core CPU on the LGA 3647 socket sometime this year, according to Intel, so probably December.
They took their Xeon and slightly modified it.
They literally just unlocked the multiplier, locked away ECC and multi-socket support, and then threw it on a board. And the board that they were using for this was ridiculous. It had 28 power phases, or at least appeared to. 28 power phases. The board was capable of delivering anywhere from probably close to 2,500 watts of power to the CPU. Not saying it was consuming that much, but that's what the board was very likely capable of. We did see another board from Asus running the 3647 socket that had, I believe, 16-phase power, I think is what it was running. Yeah, 16-phase power. That one was labeled to be able to deliver 2,100 watts. That's probably going to be a popular board. It's very expensive. It has active VRM cooling on it with actually a heatsink and 4 fans. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, the problem here is it's great that Intel's releasing this because I'm sure there's some people that will actually want to go spend what will likely be $3,500 to $4,000 on a CPU.
Especially since the Xeon version of this is $10,000.
And so they can't cannibalize that market. And even in situations where it's this big of a price gap, even the removal of ECC and multi-socket, some enterprise customers can accept that for saving so much money. Like if you're a scientific research place where redundancy you don't care about, you just need raw processing power, it's like, oh, it's a third the price. So this is going to be an expensive chip. It wouldn't even surprise me if it was $5,000.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. You're going to need a new motherboard. It's going to be, like I said, the LGA 3647 socket. And it is kind of cool that Intel's releasing this because there's some people that are going to have tons of money that are going to want to do this. They're going to put it on a huge custom loop and they're going to try and hit, 4.2, 4.3 gigahertz on all cores or something like that.
Yeah.
Which will be kind of ridiculous. But the problem is the way Intel advertised it. If they had literally announced this, but they were honest about what it was so that they weren't bullshitting and getting headlines, people wouldn't be complaining. They'd say, AMD has you topped. More on that later. But they wouldn't be bitching about it because it's basically a lie.
They could have easily said they have a 28 core coming out with an unlocked multiplier, and when you really want to push it, you can get it up to 5 gigahertz.
Right, like they got it stable to 5 gigahertz.
And that would have been something that people would have been interested in, because getting something like that stable at 5 gigahertz, no matter what you're throwing at it, is pretty cool.
That's a feat, And now, of course, who knows how well binned this chip was. Maybe they tried 6,000 chips before they could get one to 5 gigahertz. Who knows? But, or maybe not. Maybe a lot of them will hit this when they're on liquid nitrogen and stuff. We'll see. We'll have to see, right? And maybe people will even be able to get it above 5 with liquid nitrogen, which would be amazing. Could you imagine if
like your Bauer could get it to 7?
That would be, that's not going to happen. But what I will say, I mean, it's going to eat up liquid nitrogen so fast, they're probably going to have to run full pot on it, which I don't know if you guys know what that is. Basically, you literally just fill the liquid nitrogen pot up, all the way, and then when it gets down to like half, you fill it back up all the way.
Yeah.
The problem with that is your temperatures tend to get so low, except this chip's producing enough heat, maybe it won't, because what'll happen is your temperatures will go too low for the CPU to have proper stability.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you don't run full pot, but with this chip, it wouldn't surprise me if you just go straight full pot, and even that might have trouble keeping up. So this is kind of crazy. I think very, very, very few people are going to buy this chip. Anybody that needs anybody that's not just an enthusiast loaded with money, but that needs actual horsepower is going to go to AMD instead. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy, kind of cool, kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Now, if you want a not bullshit chip.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into AMD now, because Intel basically did almost nothing cool. At Computex, releasing an unusable SSD, a light CPU, and a limited edition CPU that's just a rebrand.
Still more than NVIDIA.
It's still more than NVIDIA released. This is true. We'll have a little bit on that. It'll take a moment in a little while. But we're going to jump into the AMD news, which was absolutely huge at Computex this year. There was so much stuff being released. They released Threadripper 2. And so first, it's going to be launching in Q3 of this year. That is confirmed. They haven't confirmed an exact date. I think sometime probably October-ish would be my guess. That's my best guess.
So the very end of Q3?
Probably.
No, that's actually...
Well, no, that's
Q4.
That is Q4, isn't it? Probably September then. Yeah. I'm thinking end of Q3 is more likely. Otherwise, if it was closer to the beginning of Q3, they'd probably have an exact date set already, you know? So, yeah. So it's going to be dropped into TR4 as you would expect, because AMD doesn't change sockets all the bloody time.
Yeah.
And it's going to support overclocking. Power consumption might be a little bit of trouble in terms of overclocking. More on why in a second. On boards that don't use dual 8-pin power connectors, ones that are using like an 8-pin and a 4-pin. I don't think there's any that are using a single 8-pin, but an 8-pin and a 4-pin might struggle to really push the clock speeds up on this. But then again, you're going to need some serious cooling capacity to push 32 cores and 64 threads high on the clock speed.
Yeah.
So yeah, they announced it. It's official. They're using 4 dies, and in the 24-core, presumably 3 dies inside their Threadripper CPU rather than using 2 dies. And so you get up to 32 cores and 64 threads.
Yeah.
And basically, as long as this chip is under $2,500, it's still a great value.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You get a thread per bit.
Yeah.
It's I didn't think that was going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. Kind of crazy. Kind of insane. This is crazy stuff. The 24-core looks like it's going to be impressive, too. That might be the really good chip for the price. No word on, like, actual clock speeds and stuff like that yet. So we don't really know much about it other than it's on the 12-nanometer node. And we do know there's a 3 gigahertz base clock speed. But the base clock speed's whatever. What we want to know is the boost. I'm kind of hoping that we can see, like, 4.2, 4.3 gigahertz on, like, 4 cores. Or 6 cores at a time. Because then in that case, this chip will still be really good at gaming because it'll be able to boost the cores that are gaming up to really high clock speeds. So that's something that's I think is important because on an enthusiast platform, it needs to be able to game good because that's one of the reasons people use it. I game on my 1950X. So now what's interesting here, like I said, it's 4 of the Zeppelin dies. The same ones that are used in Ryzen, 4 cores per CCX, so 8 cores per die.
Yeah.
What's weird is only 2 dies have direct memory access. Now, the reason for this is because it's still quad-channel memory because they can't just up it to 8-channel memory because it needs to function on the older boards, right? Even though they technically have 8 channels across the dies. So only 2 of the dies are directly connected to memory. The other 2 dies have to communicate through Infinity Fabric to the directly connected dies. This could cause some latency problems. I've actually done some testing myself with Threadripper when I only had RAM on 1 die, and anytime something that was RAM latency, not RAM bandwidth, but RAM latency dependent, was running on the die that wasn't directly connected, like games, performance was a little worse, unless the directly connected die was pushing all the way doing like rendering, then the performance was atrocious. Literally, like, I mean, it was almost problematic. It wasn't, well, what I should say, actually no, so that's a little bit misleading. When it got atrocious was when if I took 1 die and then took 1 thread from the die that was doing other stuff and had it work on the render too, then the performance was really bad because the bandwidth to get over there was a problem. So what I will say, okay, the game was playable, but the FPS was a lot lower than expected for Overwatch, for example. It wasn't a stuttery mess, so I guess I shouldn't say atrocious, because it was still playable, but it was definitely not running at the, near 250 FPS that I was getting without, with running on the die that's directly connected without any other performance aspects happening in rendering. So it'll be interesting to see what this causes in-game. I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll have to see what comes out in terms of testing. They did confirm, though, that they have a better boost algorithm. Which is exactly what they did with Ryzen 2. A lot of better boosting stuff. And I think, really realistically, AMD is winning in the terms of boost algorithm for desktop.
Yeah.
They are better at it right now. Intel still has the mobile platform really wrapped up in terms of its boost algorithm. To save power and everything, but...
It's almost like when you spend 5 years only working on mobile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then it's like you kind of get somewhere with it,
I
whereas...
certainly hope so.
Yeah. Whereas with the desktop, this is great. 250 watt TDP. And they said that was conservative, right? So that's a really power efficient chip for one that's running at 3 gigahertz all cores. And presumably a little higher than that in terms of having them all clocked a little bit higher. So I'm assuming we're looking at 150 watts usage with all cores at 3 gigahertz. I bet you they all turbo to 3.4 or something like that would be my guess. I know my 1950X will turbo all of them to 3.7, even though that's not even technically the max boost for it, or that's above the max boost for it. I believe max boost is supposed to be 3.6. But yeah, no pricing yet. I would assume, my assumption is they're just going to follow a standard pricing tier like they've done with all of Ryzen, where it's very easy to guess what the next chip's going to cost. I think we're just going to see a $2,000 price tag on the 32 core and a $1,500 price tag on the 24 core. Because it's logical. It's just, they tacked on another die and then they tacked on another die.
Yeah.
So if it's $2,000, this is an incredible value proposition. I feel bad now because I have a 16 core chip and there's a 32 core out.
He has to have the best or he feels bad.
Yeah. There is that. Although, no, I plan to keep the 1950X until we get Threadripper 3 running on the Zen 2 die. So, that's my plan, at least. We'll see. But we'll see what the pricing on this is and what the performance is like in game. And maybe I will end up getting one at end of year, but probably not. Now, something that I watched a lot of the AMD conference, and something that I appreciated really drastically was the fact that they didn't just list their performance aspects and list competitors' processor or leading market processor or something like that. They literally threw up graphs and they were like, our chip versus this specific Intel chip. But not only that, they had entire graphs where they would list a bunch of different specific Intel chips and comparing their chips to them directly.
Yeah.
That's something I can greatly appreciate is there's no bullshit. It's, hey, look, this is what it looks like against this chip at stock settings. Simple as that. And so that was pretty great. Now, what are your thoughts on this? AMD's promising new GPUs every year.
Personally, I don't like it.
How come?
I personally think that they should release GPUs when they are ready.
Just like NVIDIA.
If that is every year, that's fine. But promising new GPUs means that if one's not ready, they're gonna just do refreshes.
Yes, exactly. And I don't want that.
Or more specifically, my concern with AMD, rebranding. Yeah.
And we don't want... It gets really confusing to know what you're buying when so much stuff's rebranded. That's why, when AMD released Vega, that was fine because it's a different series, different name.
Yeah.
But if they had released it as the RX 590, that would have pissed me off because you have so many different architectures.
Yeah.
And it's that's not cool. That's confusing to consumers because they don't necessarily understand what they're purchasing.
Yeah.
And some of those older architectures in particular don't have support for newer features. So, for example, imagine in a world where we had, say it was the RX 590, and then you have the RX 580. The RX 580 is a Polaris architecture. Imagine, DirectX 13 coming out, and Polaris not getting support, but Vega getting support.
Yeah.
So part of a given lineup has support for it. That'd be really confusing. I hope that they're able to release good products every year and that they're not. I hope that they start following what they're doing on their CPU end and what NVIDIA does with their GPUs, and even if it's just a product refresh, as long as they're refreshing the whole series, and they're actually making improvements. Just like right now with Zen 2 or Zen Plus, that's 12 nanometer. It has better boost algorithms, stuff like that. It's technically the same architecture and everything, but it's an improvement.
Yeah, but that's not a rebrand, and that's my
it's a
biggest
refresh,
concern
not a
is
rebrand. Exactly.
that AMD has a history of just taking a chip, changing the first number in the chip, and then saying it's a new chip.
Yeah, and like pushing the clock speeds a little higher, which it's like all of them could overclock to that anyway.
Literally, yeah, like there's been times where they've released chips, they've like rebranded them, and the only clock speed difference was like they were the equivalent of like EVGA's superclocked.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course the EVGA superclock version will be clocked even higher, but it was just like, it's not a refresh, it's a rebrand. You can't just overclock it and re-release it. Whereas if they do release GPUs, say they release Vega, or well, let's say Vega, even though this is probably not going to happen. Let's say they release Vega 7 nanometer beginning of next year, and it's just whole product stack.
Yeah.
Cool. And then next time around, they release, like a refined version of Vega 7 nanometer that has some actual architectural changes, and especially if they do the whole lineup at once.
Yeah.
Because even if they just rebrand it where it's actually the same chips that are clocked higher, but they do the whole lineup, that's at least not as confusing, right? And then consumers that have the previous gen part will go, oh, well, it's almost the same thing, so they don't feel as bad.
Yeah.
The problem is when the biggest problem is when they're rebranding part of the product stack.
Yeah, it's just for me when it's like, when you go up a whole series, so like and this is what I really hope they don't do. So let's say like next time they release the 680 or 6 series.
6 series, yeah.
And then after that they release the 7 series, and the 7 series is just minor clock bumps.
Right.
That's what I have a problem with, because a lot of people look at that first number as their way to kind of tell if this is a big improvement.
Exactly.
If they go like, if they go from like 680 to 685.
Yeah, or they add an X to the entire lineup for that. And so I agree with you. What I will say is I'd at least be a little more comfortable if they rebranded the whole stack. That's at least a little less confusing to consumers, where you can tell people it's basically the same part, but it's everything.
But I
still don't think it's a good idea.
But if they were to go like from 6 to 7 and it were to be a minor thing, even if it's across the whole stack though, they're not going to advertise it as a minor upgrade.
Right, and that's part of the problem. Yeah, so like I said, I'm in agreement with that, as I don't want them to do that, but just please, at the bare minimum, stop rebranding like 2 chips as a slightly lower tier on the next set, and then coming out with a new architecture, but then the low-end chips are from 3 generations ago, and mixing those in. Nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So
at least when you have, like, with NVIDIA, it's pretty easy to see how their performance is going to go. You generally know that the 80 series of this generation will be roughly equivalent to the 70 series of the next generation.
Right.
But it's not like they're taking the 80 series and making it a 70.
Yeah.
They're actually developing a new chip for that happens to perform at that level, but that's cheaper for them to manufacture in some cases, or in some cases more power, efficient, things like that.
Yes.
Ultimately, though, for me, I don't have a problem with them releasing new chips when they're ready. Yeah. My concern is that they're going to, maybe not now, maybe not in 3 years, but in a few years, they're going to run into a certain circumstance where they end up releasing chips that are just pointless because they promised they'd release them anyway.
I hope that they're going to do annual releases. Hopefully they have annual releases that are actual improvements planned for the next 3 years, and then they stop if they can't go further than that. I think AMD maybe has finally learned that nobody likes rebranding. Rebranding's been a problem on the GPU side for a very long time for them, and it confuses people. And if it's an actual product refresh, that's fine, but even in the situation of a product refresh, please stop putting different architectures in the same series. That's issue number 1, in my opinion. Then issue number 2 is rebrands altogether. But don't use different architectures in the same process series. That's confusing to people. Everything from NVIDIA's 10 lineup is Pascal. It makes sense. It's very simple. Now, NVIDIA has done some horrible branding things that we've talked about in other podcasts, such as same GPUs with different names, or same name with different GPU, but at least they're all Pascal-based. So the EPYC server line of chips from AMD has been going really well. Lisa Su got on stage and talked about this for a while. They have a lot of new OEMs on board. There's a whole bunch of them, so I'm not going to list them all off, but like Asus and Gigabyte are a couple examples that are going to be doing manufacturing for like EPYC motherboards primarily is what they'll be making. They do brag repeatedly about the highest capabilities in the industry for servers, which is correct. The only thing that AMD is lacking on in the industry is more than 2-socket support on a single board, which realistically isn't a big deal, because if you need more performance than what 2 sockets provides on a single board, you can add another board, so it's not a huge deal. But in terms of core count, in terms of thread count, oftentimes in terms of clock speed, in terms of PCI Express bandwidth, in terms of other I/O bandwidth, they are winning. They're doing incredible things. In terms of TDP, they're even a little bit lower for the same amount of cores versus Intel. So they brag about a lot of that, which makes sense. And they compare their performance per dollar versus Intel chips, labeling, again, specific Intel CPUs, not just competitors' part. So really appreciate that. Cisco, big company, you may have heard of them before. They're kind of huge in the industry.
A little bit.
They've adopted EPYC for servers, which is really cool, bragging about how they're the highest density UCSs in existence. So that's really cool. HP Enterprise has released EPYC servers for their Proliant, I think is how that's pronounced. DL325 server is running EPYC. They're bragging about that being 25% lower cost per virtual machine compared to other dual socket setups. Of course, like I said, with Intel, you can do quad socket, but generally those aren't very common. Quad socket setups are not common on a single board. And then Tencent in China is adopting EPYC, which is pretty interesting. Their SA1 cloud service with EPYC, it's the first actual cloud performance service that's using EPYC, which is really awesome. And it's running 30% lower cost per VM is what they bragged about with that. So basically on the server end, they're seeing pretty good adoption. And the thing is, even though Intel still has by a long shot market majority, one thing that people are forgetting is servers. Oftentimes, organizations upgrade their servers every 5 to 10 years. They don't upgrade them commonly. They buy the extended warranties with their servers. I'm talking smaller organizations. Bigger ones do upgrade more frequently, but they never really get rid of the old hardware for a long time. They just add. But smaller companies that still need pretty, powerful servers, they will tend to buy the maximum warranty through Dell or HP Enterprise or whatever, and they keep it until 6 months before that warranty expires, and then they grab a new server. And so it's going to take significant time for AMD to gain back that market share, even though they do actually have the best product in the area. And of course, you run into other issues like vendor support. Some software companies say, oh, well, you can't use a server running AMD parts because we won't support that with our software, despite it being literally the same thing. It's just x86 processing. But Intel... I think the reasoning for that is because AMD's old Opteron chips were so low performance in terms of versus Intel that those vendors were probably like, we can't really support AMD because there's just not the performance there to support our application. I don't think it's anything related to programming issues, of course, but so that's a little bit unfortunate in some areas, but EPYC itself is doing really good and is growing, and I think it's going to be a huge market for AMD, and unless Intel starts adopting MCM, they're going to have issues keeping up in the server area. They cannot make a monolithic die with 32 cores. And if they do, I mean, it's so expensive. You're not looking at $4,000. You're looking at $12,000 for the same amount of cores. They need to adopt using multiple dies per chip, in my opinion. So.
All right. So next up, we're going to start seeing a lot more Ryzen laptops this year.
Very exciting.
There's a lot of different units coming out, and we're actually starting to see laptops built specifically around AMD this time, rather than just taking an Intel design and throwing an AMD chip in it. So
pretty great. It also, I think, means that we're going to see a lot better performance versus Intel on the laptop market, because when you just swap out the board and CPU on an existing laptop and you're not building around that CPU's capabilities, you run into all kinds of problems, and so that's why a lot of the current Ryzen, like Thin and Lights, I don't think perform as good as Intel. Their performance is better, but their battery life has been bad, and part of that is related to other fine-tuning things like clock speed adjustments and stuff, which they're working on their algorithms for that, of course.
I'm very happy to see more Ryzen Thin and Lights, and I can't wait until they get better.
Maybe don't upgrade your laptop till they get better. Wait for these.
Maybe.
And right now, I mean, we might see some Ryzen laptops coming out with NVIDIA GPUs, which is kind of hilarious.
We did see that one with the 1050 Ti or 1050?
It was a 1050 Ti, I believe it was, which is kind of interesting. I think, though, hey, partnering with whoever has the best product right now until you get something up to scale.
Wouldn't Vega be a very good mobile?
Okay, it would be. This is true, but I don't think they have anything that's a dedicated Vega chip for mobile. And these Ryzen chips, if it's not running an APU, if it's running a Ryzen actual just CPU specific, I don't think they really have anything that they've manufactured yet to go along with that, because Vega 56 is not going in a thin and light. Whereas their APUs, we already talked about in some other podcasts, they're releasing new APUs that'll have Vega on it, and I think those will slaughter what Intel has. But I think we'll need to see more dedicated like laptop form factor Vega chips before that happens on the Ryzen side. So this is interesting. A 7 nanometer GPU with 32 gigabytes of VRAM was shown off by AMD. This is running Vega. It's pretty impressive. It's only going to be for enterprise and workstation markets. It's probably going to suck at gaming even if you attempt to game on it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be built for that. It's built for machine learning. Lots of VRAM. There's not really a whole lot to talk about it. It was just they showed off this thing that was cool that none of us consumers can use. So yeah. But Navi is going to be coming in 7 nanometer form factor for gaming. They have promised that. We kind of thought that was happening. Now they don't have a release date or anything like that. Although some people are thinking probably middle of next year, maybe early next year, if we get lucky, which means we might never see Vega 7 nanometer for gaming. We might go straight to Navi. And rumors are having it that it's going to be similar to like GTX 1080 level performance for a much cheaper price and probably much lower power consumption. Now, of course, that's compared to a 1080. Who knows what will be around by the time these come out if NVIDIA does release something that's not just a Pascal refresh.
Realistically, they'll probably release it 1 month after this comes out.
And then they'll just beat them.
Yeah.
But we hope that there's going to be good competition. And we hope that they can scale Navi even into higher performance levels that can actually compete. So hopefully Navi really ends up being an actually good gaming architecture. Whereas Vega not only was not that great for gaming, but is not that great at high clock speeds for desktop.
Yeah.
It's a good architecture for a lot of other stuff. It's actually had pretty good adoption in the workstation and server markets.
There needs to be some favors called in at the next family reunion.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because Lisa Su and Ginseng are related.
Yeah.
Yeah, that came out recently. So, no, we don't suspect any form of collusion or anything dumb like that.
They're not like directly related. It's not like brother and sister or father-daughter or anything like that.
It's like in-laws or whatever.
Ginseng's, I think it was like, aunt is related to some of Lisa Su's family, like by...
Something like that,
It's like a... I think the most accurate way to describe it would be that she is his niece, like, once removed or something like that. I don't know how that removed stuff works, but it's like, there's a couple steps in between there, but they do share relatives.
It's interesting, and so maybe they sat down in a room together, and Lisa was like, hey, can you not release the 11 series until we have something that's at least semi-competitive? No, we don't really suspect any conclusion with this, guys, at all.
No conclusions.
No conclusions, also. They are hardcore competitors. Who knows? They may never even talk to each other.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? But kind of
interesting. They might not have even known until this came out, for all we know.
Yeah, for all we know, like, who knows? Who knows? They might not pay attention to any of that.
It's just hilarious.
Yeah, so it's just funny. We don't suspect any problems from this.
We're all related. Evolution.
I like revolutions as well.
Okay.
So Power Color did something interesting.
They announced a Vega 56 Nano.
Yeah.
It's a small Vega 56.
So, you guys might remember the R9 Fury Nano. This is just a Vega version of that. It's nice. It actually, if it comes in at MSRP, because Vega 56, as a lot of reviewers said, as a lot of reviewers have said, at MSRP, Vega 56 is actually highly competitive. Vega 64 doesn't make much sense, but Vega 56 is really, really good. It competes with the 1070, basically always beats it. It fairly commonly beats the 1070 Ti. They go hand in hand, and the 1070 Ti is actually a little more expensive at MSRP. So if this card comes out for the $400 price tag, it could be a great card for ITX systems.
Yeah.
It could actually be really good for that. We'll see.
Probably won't release at MSRP.
Probably won't.
Might not ever be MSRP.
Yeah, we can hope, but we can assume that will not happen.
Meanwhile, their biggest competitor, NVIDIA, isn't releasing a new GPU. Their next-gen GPU is not coming out for a long time.
Yeah.
We don't know what that means. It could be a couple months. It could be a refresh in a couple months, and no actual next generation chip for a year,
Maybe
2 years.
Nvidia is going to be the one that does the refreshes this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, well, it wouldn't surprise me if they release it on a 12 nanometer. If they re-release Pascal 12 nanometer and, like a slightly lower price, slightly higher clock speeds, that would be an okay. If they do the whole lineup, I'd be okay with that.
At this point, there's not just does AMD or does Nvidia not have a reason to release like a Vega consumer chip. They are actively incentivized
a Volta
against
consumer
Volta.
chip?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
they're actively incentivized against it because right now Volta is doing absolutely amazing in the server and supercomputer market.
They're selling so many, and not to mention in the workstation market.
Yeah, there was a supercomputer that IBM and the Department of Defense or Energy, one of the two.
I think it was Energy.
Yeah, Department of Energy. We're working on this new supercomputer, and it is like 27,000 V100s.
It's kind of insane. So it doesn't surprise us that Volta hasn't come to anything gaming yet. It also might and probably will never, because Volta's got tensor processing units and stuff that won't be used in gaming and are just more expensive. Well, right, but are just more expensive to produce because they're on a larger die. So realistically, what I think, so we know NVIDIA is going to be talking about at Hot Chips in August. They're going to be talking about their next gen GeForce. That is confirmed. Now, what we can say, or well, at least in theory, it's confirmed. They pretty much outright said it on the schedule for Hot Chips. So what I think is going to happen is either they're going to talk about their truly next generation GeForce architecture, but it's not going to come out this year. It'll be sometime next year. I think that's the most likely thing, is they're just going to talk about it. Or the less likely one, but my thing is, if they talk about and release something in August, I think it will be an 11 series that is a Pascal refresh that they call Ampere or Turing or whatever. Turing, I think, is going to be the next gen Volta, and I think Ampere was probably a middle of the ground that they're maybe never releasing. But if something does come out, and you're basically going to see slightly higher clock speeds, like we said, probably 12 nanometer processing node, we'll see like the 1180 have the same amount of CUDA cores as the 1080 Ti. So people with the 1080 Ti, it'll be like 5% lower performance or maybe 10% lower performance.
And then we'll get an 1180 Ti in like 6 months. That'll be a little bit better.
Yeah, it'll have the same amount of CUDA cores as the Titan XP. Not the Titan X Pascal, the Titan XP Pascal. And that'll obviously beat by a decent margin the 1080 Ti, just like the current Titan XP does. But yeah, people were a little disappointed. Jensen was asked multiple times about whether or not they were going to release a new GeForce, and he said, "We're not here to talk about that. It's a long time from now." So yeah, there's that. Qualcomm.
Yes, I am very excited about this announcement. So they've had, I think it was last year, they announced in partnership with Microsoft, essentially using the Snapdragon 835 mobile chip for computers. So this would be the idea of like having kind of what we used to have a long time ago of laptops with cellular.
Yes, when that was common.
Quite a while.
Yes, and better battery life and other things like that.
Yeah, so that was all part of the Snapdragon 835 program. Now there's a few problems with that.
Performance was one of them.
Performance was really bad. Apps weren't optimized for it. It wasn't designed for PC usage, and so it ran into some issues.
So basically, nobody bought them.
Yeah,
they did not sell well.
Qualcomm now is releasing a modified version of the Snapdragon 845 that's dedicated to Windows 10 devices. It's got specific hardware level optimizations for Windows, and so it's a Snapdragon 850. It's designed for these same, what Apple or Microsoft is calling always connected. So all of this lineup, like if you see an always connected laptop, it's a Snapdragon 850 right now, is what it's going to be.
And that's pretty cool. I like this idea.
On top of that, we're seeing Microsoft have new tools and SDKs to more easily bring 64-bit like Windows Store applications to this and make them run better. And then what's really interesting and what I really like from this is they're taking something that is been commonplace on like Android phones forever, of not having like a hibernation mode. You just unlock your phone.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always on, but it's super low power.
Yes. And that's what they're working on doing with this. So that's
something you can't do with an x86 CPU like Intel's. Yeah. Intel's been trying, you just can't.
Yeah. So if you have a Snapdragon 850 laptop, you just open it and use it.
I know, it's great. And it's like, even coming out of sleep mode on something like this, a very modern machine, my XPS 15 here, it still kind of sucks.
Yeah.
It takes a few seconds, and it's just that delay doesn't feel snappy.
Yeah.
And so you acknowledge it's in sleep.
Yes.
Right? And then, of course, you don't get notifications and stuff. So you open up out of sleep, you type in your password, and you get ding, 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 all your crap comes in.
Yeah.
And it's a little frustrating in that sense.
Especially
and,
with
nothing
services
stays
like
updated.
Slack.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's my one problem with Slack mainly is like when you unlock a computer, when you wake up a computer that's been in sleep and you have Slack on it, just notification.
Yeah.
I turned off the Windows Notification Center notifications to deal with that.
Just to deal with that. Yeah, me too. So what you're telling me here is Intel's being hit on all fronts by competitors?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, has that ever happened before?
I don't think so.
I mean, we've got better for high-end mobile machines. Obviously, I think Intel will still have a good amount of the market in the high-performance mobile computing, like the XPS 15s and stuff of this world, although Ryzen's competing with that really well. Ryzen on desktop is competing with Intel really well in everything but the clock speed race. On the high-end desktop, Threadripper is just slaughtering what Intel's offerings are. And Epic's slaughtering Intel as well on the server market. If I were an Intel investor, I'd get scared, but they'll probably just invest more money. Because investors are stupid.
That's how you get out of the situation. Throw more money at them to build better products.
Yeah, right.
Realistically, they should replace some people.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm really excited to see the Snapdragon 850, and I really want to see the performance that we get out of it, especially not necessarily at launch, because it's probably still going to not be great at launch.
Yeah.
But 6 months down the line, when some people have these in hand, and developers, at least some of them, are starting to be more incentivized to develop applications or optimize applications for this.
Yes.
And I hope we see something built into the Universal Windows platform that makes it so that developers don't have to put any significant effort into it.
Yeah, because they need that incentive to be there where they just don't have to do anything, because otherwise developers aren't going to put the money into it unless there's a lot of market share that have bought these, and the market share is not going to come if the developers don't support stuff. So it's all on Microsoft's hands and Qualcomm's hands to get this done correctly and to get this to actually be a thing.
Yeah.
So...
speaking of very high performance Snapdragon chips.
So Asus,
Asus had a pretty baller Computex.
They did. They released
they
released at least one of everything at the Computex.
Yeah, a little bit. So let's start out with their phone. We're going to talk about ROG products first.
Yes. So, there's so much Asus news, guys. It's ridiculous.
So they announced the ROG phone. This is meant, realistically, the only true competitor right now would be the Razer phone.
Yeah.
And this kind of blows that out.
There's one other phone, too, that I can't remember the name of it, that hasn't technically come out, that's a more budget-oriented gaming phone. I think Unbox Therapy did a video on it.
This isn't meant to compete with that.
This is not, no.
This is meant to be
But I'm saying in the realm of the gaming phones.
Yeah. This is like the top tier of gaming phones. So
it's insane, guys.
The display is a 90 hertz. Now, I know that's less than Razer, but I'll explain some other stuff. 1 millisecond response time OLED HDR display. So essentially, it's a panel that you would see in a VR headset.
Yeah, which is
pretty crazy. And by
essentially,
essentially, I mean it is.
Yeah.
Because VR headsets use 90 hertz, 1 millisecond response OLEDs.
And the 1 millisecond response time is better than what Razer is pushing out of their... is it IPS, or are they using...
I think it's an IPS.
Okay.
It's not OLED.
Yeah, it's not OLED, and it's not...
I don't think it's Super LCD.
No, there's the one other one that they use in their... IGZO. I don't think it's IGZO either.
It's not.
Yeah, okay,
no, it's definitely not.
So it's IPS. So this will actually probably feel at least equal in smoothness and response time to Razer's display. Maybe better.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Now, when I mentioned the high-performance Snapdragons, this is using a Snapdragon 845, but not a normal one. Asus managed to exclusively get binned 845s running at 2.96 gigahertz.
400 more megahertz and you'd be in 3 gigahertz. Come on.
I think it's fine. The fact that they're so close to 3 is kind of
I think the phone's cooling capabilities could actually hit 3. ARM chips are not known for high clock speeds. It's very hard to get them to high clock speeds. So the fact that binned chips are hitting 2.96, that is already a huge challenge. So silicon in terms of x86 chips can go way higher.
Clock speed they could consistently get.
Yeah, there's probably a few that could hit 3. But in terms of it is impressive that ARM's up to these speeds though. I want people to keep that in mind is ARM chips are not very good at clocking high. The way they're built is just not meant for that. The architecture is not designed for that. So when you start seeing clock speeds in the high 2 gigahertz range, that's very impressive for an ARM chip.
And then this close to 3.
Even on
this
desktops
is,
and stuff, and like servers that are using ARM, they're not running at super high speeds.
And then, so this has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery to be able to run all of this. And it does 15 watts of charging normally, but it also includes a accessory that you can use to plug into that essentially helps compensate for the extra charging, and it can do full 20 watts.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is actually ridiculous. And it makes me wonder, like, they did this, and it's like, that's not even a benefit to, like, gaming. Because it's not like the phone's gonna not, like, it's not like 15 watts, it wouldn't charge while gaming.
No, it's just this would be a slightly better experience if they included it.
Although, I could see it related to the gaming aspect in one way, where if you tend to game on your battery a lot, you run that battery down to 20% in the first half of the day, and then you plug it in for 30 minutes, and then you're ready for the rest of the day. Yeah. So I can see that, because you're going to be using more battery with this phone if you're gaming on the go.
Yeah.
Especially with a couple particular attachments.
Yeah. So on top of all of that, so as far as ports, it's got 2 USB-C ports. Yes. One on the bottom, one on the side, and I'll explain the side one in a second. It also has a headphone jack on the bottom. So you're good. You've got headphone jack and USB-C.
So they didn't screw people over like Razer by not putting a headphone jack on it.
No. Now on top of that, so that side USB-C port can be also used for charging.
So you can have it, like, if you don't use any of the attachments we're about to talk about, you can still hold it with that port facing up and charge that way so it doesn't get in the way of playing games.
Yes. Or more likely you can hold it down. That way the cable isn't wrapping over.
Well, or you could be an idiot like me and just have the cable going over the top.
Because the triggers.
Yeah.
Which I'll explain
that's right.
in a second.
The triggers.
So yeah, ideally the way that they have it, you would be holding the phone like this, cable coming out the bottom, sideways. That's how it's designed. On top of that, though, they also include a active cooler. Yes, an active cooler for your phone.
A fan?
Yes.
On a phone?
That plugs into that side USB-C port. It goes down the middle of the device.
Yes.
And it also adds a headphone jack. So when you're playing games sideways...
And a USB-C port still there,
so it
right?
continues it's passed through so you can charge it.
So you can charge it still from the bottom while using this attachment.
So you can charge and have your headphones and it not block, like normally where it would be is right here, so it would block your hand.
Yes.
Your hand would have to be sit awkwardly around
Which is so annoying. I've tried, I don't play games on my phone much, but when doing so, it's a disgusting experience for those reasons in particular.
So that's already crazy enough. Now, I keep holding up my Pixel 3 just because it's kind of a good example phone for this. This has the like squeeze functionality that HTC first came out with. Asus is bringing some of that functionality to this, but not for squeezing.
It's to the next level, guys.
It's got 3 different zones. One on this corner, one on this corner. Now you can see I pointed out you hold it this way, so it's triggers for when you're gaming.
Yeah.
On top of that,
they're programmable on everything too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It also has one on the bottom left or the other corner. That way you have like a macro button or whatever you need, quick launching, whatever you want. You can set it on a per app basis.
Yes. Really impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet.
No, not even close. One last thing, actually, I forgot to mention pertaining to the 845 and its high clock speeds. There is a couple different modes. So by default, it runs a bit slower when you're not in games or whatever. Yeah. And it has software so that you can essentially you can pick games that when it launches, it forces it into a higher clock speed mode. That way you don't have to worry about the auto adjustment slowing it down.
Yeah, because sometimes that causes problems. Yeah. So.
But also, in the quick settings of the phone, there's a toggle to force that. So if you're like having some issues with apps or you're testing something, you can just quick toggle it into its highest performance mode.
Guys, this phone literally has an overclock quick toggle.
Yeah.
In your quick toggles for that's just like it's kind of amazing. Asus basically went like, well, this is what everybody wants in a phone, but let's douse a little bit of our PC knowledge on top of this.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what they've done. There's so many things.
Now you might be thinking, all these features, all this is great, but still gaming like this is not a good experience.
Yeah, like touchscreen phone gaming is generally not very good.
Yeah.
Even on ones that are really well designed for it, it's not a very fun experience.
Despite EA at E3 trying to make you watch a 6-minute gameplay of Command & Conquer on the phone, it's not something that you want to do. So, what Asus is also going to sell is 3 different docks. So they have the most interesting one to me is the Twin View dock. So you mount your phone at the top, and it has a second screen at the bottom, essentially turning your phone into a DS. It's the exact same 90 hertz, very high color accuracy display that you already
This
get.
controller has a display.
Yes. And a 6,000 milliamp hour battery to continue the gaming for
You
longer.
should be able to game for somewhere in the realm of, like, with both of those together, probably somewhere in the realm of 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah, because you're looking at 10,000 milliamp hours.
That's kind of ridiculous.
Insane.
And the nice thing about that is it's a battery backup that you could keep with you, where you could... With the way it's set up, I'm assuming, obviously we haven't tested this, I'm assuming it doesn't have to be, like, powered on in a sense, where you could bring that with you as your backup battery on a camping trip, and you don't necessarily game with it, you just plug your phone in there at night and put it away.
Yeah.
And it charges.
Yeah, you bring one thing and you have multiple options for what to do with it.
Yes, it's so cool.
On top of that, so it's got physical triggers instead of the touch-sensitive ones.
Yes.
However, those physical triggers also have the a high-end vibration motor similar to the rest of the phone, so you get better haptic feedback while gaming.
It's pretty cool. It has joysticks too, doesn't it? Or no? Or do you use the phone?
I think you use the bottom display.
Use the bottom display, but that's
no
more
longer
comfortable.
in your way.
Yeah, exactly. That's because using them, it's not quite as good feedback-wise, but the biggest problem with using joysticks on a phone on a touchscreen is you block half your display.
Yeah.
So, really impressive. And it's a 6-inch display, right? I believe? Yeah, I think they're both 6-inch, yeah.
And then on top of that, one of the other docks is the desktop dock. It's literally just like you mount it sideways into the side USB-C port like you would like a Switch.
Yes.
And it's plugged into, your monitor, gigabit Ethernet, keyboard and mouse. And so you just drop it down, you can go play PUBG or a good game like Fortnite.
Yeah, on mobile.
On your mobile phone, but this is just your gaming machine. So if you have like multiple setups, or let's say you have a computer and this, and you are like wanting to play Fortnite specifically against other mobile players, or there's some interesting, because sometimes good exclusive mobile games do come out.
Yeah.
And you can play that, just drop it in, play it with a keyboard and mouse, though, get that better experience.
Yeah, basically you can go own all the people that don't have enough money to buy a keyboard and mouse for their phone.
Yeah.
So what's this Y-Gig dock?
So the Y-Gig dock is really interesting. Think like Chromecast as far as being a video receiver, but you still hold the phone like a phone. So it's literally to play wirelessly.
Yeah.
And then there's what you saw as far as like making it look like a Switch, because there is going to be for sale for this what's called the Game Vice controller, which essentially adds full-on control similar to a Switch.
Yeah, they mount onto the side. The phone mounts in this little fabric
That's a
thing.
third-party accessory.
Oh.
Yeah. They said that was a third-party attachment.
It didn't look like a third-party attachment.
No, it didn't, but it apparently is.
Oh, okay.
And
so then you just use the phone. It's got a screen
yes,
and controller and then screen.
So you still get the dual screen experience that you would from the TwinView dock, because they are working with developers on implementing things like having a map down below, having other types of functionality. So you can literally use all of that stuff while playing on your TV.
That's really impressive. Yes. That's really cool.
It's essentially, you have the choice of either having it be a Switch, a Wii U, a gaming like computer almost, or a DS.
It's amazing. And it's really, really good design. I'm maybe considering picking this up, although it doesn't... I don't play games or use anything high performance on my phone, so I don't think it's a good fit for me personally. I'm probably going to be a loser and buy a BlackBerry.
Yeah, you are a loser.
Thanks, man.
While it has some weird, like, permanent orange accents,
it
has an RGB light, and both on the phone and on the active cooler.
Yes.
And you can sync that that light with with 4 of your other friends, so 5 people can have their lights synced if you're in like a local tournament.
Kind of interesting. They think of everything. And to touch something on the active cooler, the way it works is it actually does have little tunnels. It has 2 of them, and they have an orange grade on them. That's the part that makes me mad. You don't put RGB next to a permanent color that's not black or white. Please stop. But anyway, it's an active cooler, and so it circulates air through that area, which is a really interesting and cool design.
What's especially bad about that is with the next thing we're going to talk about, the Thor power supply, they did color perfectly.
They did.
There's 2 different power supplies coming out. The one they showed was a 1200 watt. They will also be releasing an 850 watt. Both are coming out.
Where's my 1500 watt Asus?
No. Both are coming out Q3. It's a platinum power supply, fully blacked out body, fully blacked out sleeves, including the PCB on the inside for the 4 people that'll ever see it.
Yeah, if you haven't mounted it in some weird direction.
Fully blacked out. The only color on it is the OLED display and the addressable RGB lights.
Yeah, it has an OLED display.
So you can have,
and
like...
it's not that tiny.
No.
It's, what, 3-inch?
I think so,
I think
yeah.
it's a 3-inch display.
So you can have performance stats or power consumption or whatever you want on that display.
I mean, if you want, you can play PUBG on that display.
I want someone to do that. I want someone to have their desktop in front of them with the OLED display there, and then their OLED from their AIO as another game, and they're just playing two games on their desktop.
Although the only problem with that is it connects through software, so I don't know if you could actually have it display like what a display. I don't think Windows can see it as display output.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but probably not.
Yeah, because Linus was able to put his face on one. I think.
Yeah, but you can do you can probably upload anything custom to it, but it doesn't. I imagine that it doesn't do it in terms of just like, oh, this is a Windows display for you, you know.
Yeah.
But who knows?
And then also the other notable thing, 10-year warranty.
Now, this is not applicable to the OLED and RGB lights, though.
Which makes sense, because if they're on all the time, they're not going to last 10 years.
Yes. But the PSU itself, 10 years.
Yes.
That's really solid. We're seeing that more and more in the industry of PSUs, bigger and bigger warranties, which is great. Yeah. It's just great. I've had to warranty a power supply. It sucks when a power supply goes out, but a good warranty helps that pain and suffering a little more. Yeah. So, yeah, pretty impressive. I'm excited for these. It's not enough wattage for my system, but, you know, it's enough for most.
Depending on the price, I will consider the 850 watt.
Yeah, because that'd be perfect for most people. The 850 watt makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem I have with the 1200 watt power supplies are a little bit of an iffy area, in my opinion, because anybody that needs 1200 watts, chances are they might actually need more than that.
But if you utilize 1200 watts, you shouldn't be buying a 1200 watt power supply.
Correct. This
is more so for people that are hitting like 1,000.
Yes, I understand that. But 850 is enough for a lot of people, right? Like the majority of the market. Unless you're running more than one GPU, you probably don't need more than 850. Probably.
For those that don't know, the reason that I say that you should get 1,000 or you should get a 1200 watt if you're using 1,000, or realistically, like you shouldn't get an 850 watt if you're using like 800, is ideally power supplies run at their best at 80% usage.
Yeah, generally it's around 80%. Yeah. Sometimes plus or minus. I've seen some where their peak is at like 60, but generally it's around the 80% mark. So you want to try and stay in that realm of power supply. That's where like my system, for example, I'm pretty sure it can consume about 1250 once I have everything overclocked, and it's like I shouldn't be trying to run that off a 1200 or 1300 watt PSU, so I'm putting a 1500 watt in there. Better efficiency is
why not 2,000?
Because I don't want to blow a circuit. All right, so we got a couple more things. All right, so ROG did some other stuff.
Yes,
more
I mentioned
PC stuff.
AIOs with OLED displays. They announced two different ones. They announced the Ryujin, which is their larger one, and the Ryu, which is their smaller.
I think the Ryujin's supposed to be pronounced like Ryogen. Like cryogen? No. I don't know. No. It's a weird name.
It's a Japanese name. It's not
okay.
Ryogen.
I heard a lot of people saying it that way.
Okay,
that's why I wasn't sure. Okay, well maybe you're wrong. I'm just kidding. That makes more sense because of the way it's spelled. Yeah. I thought it was literally cryogen, but with an R. No. And I was like, because it's cold. Yeah. Yeah.
So
but anyway.
The Ryujin would be 240 millimeter and 360 millimeter options. Now, something really interesting that they did.
This is amazing. I love this.
The pump for this is a pretty big square pump. But what they did was they added a 60 millimeter fan into the pump that pushes air all around to cool the area around the socket.
So they claim it's going to be very quiet. I trust that because you don't need a ton of airflow. But just having some form of airflow over your VRMs is incredibly important, especially in a case which we're seeing more and more common ones that don't necessarily have an exhaust fan right next to that area. Not having airflow over VRMs can cause all kinds of problems. You can have crashes, you can have temperature issues, you can have components failing, and so it's important to have air around those, and a lot of times systems with AIOs in them don't have very good airflow over the VRMs. Yeah. This is basically specifically to help with VRM cooling and a little bit with RAM cooling, but RAM doesn't generally have issues. Really exciting, actually. This is cool.
Yeah. Now, personally for me, one thing I have a problem with as far as this goes is how the pump looks, because of the fact that it has an OLED display, but the way that it's designed is it's a square. And there's a line going down the middle. One side has like their logo, the other side has the OLED display. Yeah. So you have a square OLED display within a triangle within part of the AIO.
It's a little weird.
So it's very small, and it just looks kind of odd.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd.
They should have done either like the top half or the bottom half or the left or right half or just anything like that, rather than like a square within a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a little funky looking, but it's still cool to see more components in the AIO market, as well as some other stuff. So we got a couple of rapid fire topics from ROG for you guys here, because they released one of everything.
Real quick, the
there's
Ryu
the
as
Ryu.
well.
That's right. Yes.
So this one comes in either 240mm or 120mm options. And this one also has the OLED display and RGB. This one, though, the pump is round. It does not have that additional fan. It's just a round pump, but within the round pump, in the center of it is a square OLED display. In my opinion, it looks a lot better because of the less awkward design. Yeah. And then also all around the outside of the pump is RGB lights.
Yes, which is pretty cool looking.
Yeah, it looks
pretty
very
cool.
interesting.
So like we said, ROG basically, they released exactly one of everything, as well as we've got some other stuff from ASUS here. This is still the ASUS section.
Yeah.
So they released...
I was going to say, explain 802.11ax, because we're going to get into that quite a lot.
Okay, well, first I'll say they released a case, a desktop PC case, ROG case. Whatever. It's cool looking. It's got some problems. It probably won't be out till end of the year.
Yeah.
So ROG also released an 802.11ax router. Now, 802.11ax is an interesting technology. I actually haven't studied it super heavily, but it is a pretty substantial improvement over 802.11ac. You obviously get more bandwidth, lower latency, stuff like that. One of the big things is more bandwidth capacity for large amounts of devices, and from what I understand, better device management. 802.11ax is a pretty interesting technology.
Yeah, it's supposed to be anywhere from 4 to 10 times faster than existing Wi-Fi. And then the wider and multiple channels will help increase throughput even more.
Yeah, and especially when you have more devices connected, it's going to help with that, which is becoming more and more common, is rather than just lots of devices, we're seeing lots of high bandwidth devices being connected to routers.
The speed of a single 802.11ax stream will be 3.5 gigabits, whereas a single stream of 802.11ac is about 866 megabits.
Yeah, so it's a pretty substantial upgrade. 802.11ax is interesting, and it's cool.
4x4 MIMO would result in 14 gigabits capacity.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Now, of course, those are always the rated. The actual speeds are always quite a bit lower.
Oh, yeah.
But the idea is just pretty substantial. The idea with routers that have these crazy performance stats, because people go, well, why would you do that? It's like we can get 10 gigabit networking and stuff like that, right? And it's like, then you're not having issues of interference and stuff. The reasoning for really, really high bandwidth router capabilities is for the multi-device. It's for the guy over there downloading a gigabit per second on his laptop, and the guy over there downloading 500 megabits per second on his phone, and being able to manage that really well.
Now, in my opinion, the most important part of 802.11ax is the, what they're called, it's called ODMFA. It's like orthogonal frequency division multiple access. Yeah. Essentially, think about all the different Wi-Fi channels they're dividing into further into subchannels.
Yes.
It's just going to mean a lot less congestion, which for apartments, for more...
For anybody with Xfinity, where they have an extra router in their house thanks to Xfinity.
But like for whether it's anything from like very compacted cities like DC.
Yes.
To places with big apartment buildings like, downtown Portland or New York or wherever, this is going to help a lot with performance. This will probably be more impactful for average users than the speed improvements.
Yes. And like I said, a lot of it also comes down to the congestion helps with this too, is just managing more devices.
Yeah.
Because that's a tough thing. Now, my opinion is don't upgrade to 802.11ax until we see mesh router technology with 802.11ax, because it's not necessarily going to, in fact, from what I understand, AX isn't going to give you any distance improvement.
Yeah.
Except maybe the fact that there's less congestion might help.
Now, if you have a small apartment.
Yeah, then you're fine. Yeah. Yes, correct. But if you have a house or you have a big house, probably a good idea to go the mesh route, in my opinion. I have gone mesh in my house here with Google Wi-Fi. It's been so much better than even a centrally located high-performance router. So much better. And so, like, I hope that we see Google Wi-Fi and other stuff like that get upgraded to AX.
It will. It will at some point.
And AX also, I think we might actually see some distance improvement. Maybe not necessarily through walls and stuff, but in terms of if there's less congestion, it's less likely to have integrity drop off before it gets somewhere. True,
ASUS announced an ROG one of those. They also announced an RGB mouse pad, which, everyone's doing, except there's a couple unique things with this. Size-wise, it's a little different than normal. So instead of being wider and shorter, it's taller and a little bit thinner.
Yes,
but so you can move up and down to essentially have less issue with that. Depends on the game that you play as to what would ultimately be better. There are some games where, if you have to move your
And
mouse...
I mean, mouse pads, you can
But
rotate
then the
them.
cord would be in a really awkward spot.
I mean, you just cut off the cord.
Okay.
Uh,
So also, though, another unique thing, and this is something I've been asking, both of these actually, the next two things, are something I've been asking for in mouse pads that have a USB port already. Pass-through. USB-A
yeah, because they
pass-through.
mostly just use it for power and, like, basically no bandwidth.
Yes.
So
if I can plug in, like, a flash drive or something into my mouse pad...
just like
very
with keyboards,
convenient
it's
spot,
very
yes.
useful, yeah.
And then on top of that, the top corner of one model of this, I think it's a $10 edition, is Qi charging. So
yeah, and they don't have a Qi charging mouse, it's just for your phone.
Yeah. So if you have, a smartwatch or an iPhone or a
Corsair's
Samsung
Qi
device,
charging mouse would work with it. Yeah.
you just pop it on the top corner and it starts charging.
Yeah. And that's part of why I think they made it taller, was you can charge your phone or whatever up there without getting in the way. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
So ROG headset, this is interesting. Quad DAX and USB-C.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an ROG headset. I mean, if you like all ROG, then cool.
It'll work well with the ROG phone that also has a headphone jack, so you can just use whatever.
Yes. And then there's the Hero and Scar laptops.
Yeah, so these, they have i5s and i7s. You can get up to a 1070 as far as specs. Ultimately, they're realistically fairly standard gaming laptops. The Scar is what they consider to be the FPS one, and the Hero is their mobile one. And the thing that differentiates them and why they have like an FPS and a mobile one is that the keys on the laptop, specifically on the Scar, the WASD, and on the Hero, the QWER keys, are white.
Right. And I mean, it's kind of just a branding thing, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's cool. And they look like pretty good value-oriented laptops.
Mm-hmm.
They're not insanely expensive, so they're nice. So Asus has another division, not ROG, but the TUF division. Now, TUF has been around making motherboards for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes what it was basically stripping out some of the insane features on their ROG boards and selling them for cheaper. But that doesn't mean stripping out any of like the performance for like power delivery and other things like that until more recently they've released some crappy TUF boards, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's becoming a bigger brand like we're about to go over in a moment. But the idea originally was kind of like you get rock solid stability and still pretty good overclocking and stuff on a board that's quite a bit cheaper because they're not trying to recoup the R&D for the crazy expensive features on ROG boards. So TUF brand is expanding to basically everything.
It's essentially turning into a competitor to ROG.
It's turning into a lower end ROG, in my opinion. It's turning into the one step below ROG.
Yeah, competitor.
Which is kind of what TUF has been. The problem is with the boards, like I said, more recently, they've been stripping down the VRMs and stuff and making them literally just like Strix boards with a different brand on them, or even worse in some cases, which is frustrating. But so we have a laptop, the FX504. Looks pretty solid. 1060, 120 hertz display. Probably one of the best displays on a more budget-oriented laptop out there.
Yeah.
So that's cool that we're seeing that become not just a premium thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's the case, which is interesting.
The TUF case.
The TUF case.
It's tough. So it's got a textured design, and then like the top dust cover, mesh cover is digital camo. It's got fabric handles to carry it, so if you're going to a friend's house or a LAN or whatever, it is a full ATX case, so hopefully they'll also release an MATX.
Yeah,
but
for now
nice
it's just good to like move around when you're working on it mostly, but yeah.
Ultimately, the other big thing is it's got pretty limited I/O for the price. It's going to be like a $150 case.
And doesn't it have like two USB 3 and two USB 2 or something?
The front
like that?
only has 2 USB ports, not 4.
Not 4.
No USB-C, which has been the standard for 2018.
Yeah, most cases that have come out at Computex this year have some form of USB-C. Even if it's not 3.1 Gen 2, they at least have the connector on there.
This doesn't have that. It's got 2 USB-A 3.0 ports.
But this is a prototype, so they might change that. Every news outlet has been saying, please put better I/O on it, so they probably will.
For $150, they better.
Yeah, in my opinion, I agree. They need to change a few things about this case for that price.
Yeah. There's also a TUF keyboard and a TUF mouse. And a TUF headset.
Yeah. So those are things. They exist.
Gaming fairly generic gaming headset, fairly generic gaming keyboard and mouse. Mechanical.
Nothing super
Cherry
special.
MX.
Yeah. Cool. Not a huge topic. So now some Asus news that's just Asus, not their TUF brand or their ROG brand.
Yeah, so these next two are two of my personal most interested in, as far as considering buying announcements from Computex. And so I love that it's like Asus. That's both of them.
Yeah.
First up, laptop-wise, they announced the ZenBook Pro with a very unique modification compared to normal ZenBooks.
Aside from being insanely powerful for the size.
Well, ZenBook Pros
which
have generally
they've
done.
been that, yeah. But that's that's what's always differentiated them from a lot of the other crowd. Now they have another thing.
The ZenBook Pro has a touchscreen for the trackpad. It's a 5.5-inch 1080, so it's essentially the OnePlus screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is cool because I personally love glass trackpads. Now I like the matte glass trackpads. That's my
the
personal
display
preference.
Is matte.
Yes, so that's
so
what's
that
so
it doesn't
cool.
have glare.
Yes.
But yeah, so you can just use it as a trackpad. You can have quick toggles. You can have like app specific things. Think like the MacBook Pro's like touch bar.
Yeah,
but probably more useful.
It's on PC, so you're going to be able to do a lot more customization to it.
Yeah,
because you can just do whatever you want. I'm sure it's going to come with software for
and it doesn't replace
stuff.
Your function keys.
And then that too, which was a horrible thing in the beginning. Yeah, so it's a great idea. I love the idea. It's a pretty large trackpad at that point.
And then as far as performance for this laptop, you have the option of either an i5, an i7, or an i9.
Of course, that's just branding. The i9 is just higher clocked version of the 6-core i7s, but
which is still like the fact that it's getting like a top tier processor in a
thin and light laptop. Yeah.
And then also a GTX 1050 Ti.
Kind of insane. So this machine looks to be very, very, very good. I'm guessing for the top spec model, we're gonna see $3,000+ for it.
I think 23
for a top spec model. I don't know. Maybe 25.
It depends on the storage.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
For the i9 1050 Ti, I think it'll start at about 23.
Yeah, with like 512 gig SSD or something, and then it might go up to 3,000 with like up to a 2 terabyte SSD or something. But like the i5 with a 1050 Ti, you might be seeing it in the realm of like 1,800, 1,900.
Yeah,
which isn't too bad. I mean, XPS is a little bit better value in that sense because you can get the 6-core and you can get the 1050 Ti for about the $1,800.
Yeah.
But still pretty impressive. So Asus, a console gaming monitor.
Yeah, so this one...
Is this the first one since Sony released a console gaming monitor?
That I have seen, yes.
Okay.
So for those that don't know, during the PS3 era, when they first started trying to push 3D games, Sony released I think it was 24-inch 3D display that was specifically for gaming on the PS3. And it had a couple of unique features. Ultimately, it didn't do that well, not because of the idea of the monitor, but because it was just bad design as far as actually how it worked.
Yeah.
The 3D had a lot of issues. I actually bought one and then returned it because I had so many issues with it as far as ghosting and stuff. But they announced, or Asus...
I'd forgotten you had one. Yeah, you told me about it. I don't know if I think I saw it once.
I don't think I showed you the 3D though. I tried to watch Avatar in 3D.
Itself.
Oh my, the ghosting made me sick.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Ghosting is a horrible thing.
So Asus announced a 32-inch 4K HDR console gaming monitor. Now you might be asking, like, what makes it a console monitor versus just a 32-inch 4K?
Quite a few things, actually.
Yeah, so it's only 60 hertz, and the response time is...
You can't go more than 60 hertz at 4K realistically anyway, unless you have DisplayPort. So.
Yeah. And then the response time is not as good as like a normal PC monitor. It's 13 milliseconds. I almost said megaseconds.
Yeah.
13 millisecond response time, which is still better than almost every...
13,000-second response
it's
time.
still better than like almost every TV.
Yes.
So for consoles, that's better than expected.
And it's FreeSync.
Yeah,
which is
free
amazing,
sync from a 40 to 60 hertz. So for like the
AMD's
Xbox,
owning the console market,
yeah,
man.
For the Xbox owners, I mean, of course they're owning the console market. They're the only chip.
No, I know, but I mean, like in terms of like, no, I don't. I mean, they own the console market, which is allowing them to own it more because of
NVIDIA
FreeSync and stuff.
Opted out of it.
Yeah.
They were offered it and they said no.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of there's not very good profit margin.
Yeah, they just
though there's a lot of sales.
Yeah, they just wanted to spend their time on other things, and they did go with the Switch because the Switch was a way to advance their ARM division, which was something they were wanting to improve upon.
Yes.
But yeah, back to this monitor. So it's 95% of the DCI-P3 color spectrum, and then it's 600 nits, so not full 1,000, but I think that was done to help with the price because for a monitor that's specifically targeted towards console gamers, it can't be too expensive. We don't know the price yet.
Yeah, this can't be a $2,500
But if it's
monitor.
$500, then you're looking at, for an Xbox One X and this, $1,000.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so I think that if 500 is the absolute max that this will sell at a good rate for.
Yeah.
As far as I/O, it's got 3 HDMI ports and 1 DisplayPort 1.2. All 3 HDMIs are 2.0, I believe.
And so you could use this with a PC,
Yeah.
of course. It's
realistically,
possible.
like for me, what I would want with this, because if it's a reasonable price, I plan on getting it, is 2 proper PC monitors and then this monitor off to the other side with my consoles connected to that.
And then
also have it as a secondary PC monitor.
And I mean, with 4K HDR and 600 nits, it'd be a great monitoring monitor for doing editing 4K footage.
Yeah, especially since it's 95% of the DCI-P3.
This is good enough. I mean, it's a pretty big display.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I'd look for my editing setup. I'd want a 27 probably, but maybe. Yeah. I might consider this as an editing display when it comes out.
And then a couple of other unique features for this. So down at the bottom by the base, it has essentially 2 spots for you to set your controllers.
Yeah, it's a pretty big base.
Yeah.
Which is important, I think, for something that's designed more like a TV area. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to get knocked around, and it's more likely for kids to bump into it and stuff, so it's okay.
But so you have the spots for controllers. Now, you might think, like, whatever, I still have to go move it somewhere to charge it. No, they have 4 USB ports on it. 2 are specifically for charging, and they're right near that. Those 2 spots, 1 on each side. And then there's also 2 USB pass-throughs for your console.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool, actually. I like the idea.
They put it seems like a lot of thought and care into making this really a good overall accessory for consoles.
Right, rather than just releasing a monitor and calling it a console monitor.
Yeah.
Like, they actually thought about what can we do to benefit console users. Mm-hmm. And we can appreciate.
Overall, really, looking at Asus, this Computex, that's one of the things that's fairly consistent across their lineup. When you look at like the ROG Phone, the ZenBook, it's like they put a lot of thought into like, who is this for? What can we do to make this better?
Yeah, exactly. Them. Yeah, and so the Asus is doing some pretty incredible stuff, and I hope that they listen to some of the feedback on like their cases and stuff. Mm-hmm. What I will admit is like their Tough Series cases, they're actually, for a first attempt at a case, they're really, really good.
Yeah.
But I still wouldn't buy one until it's refined more. So hopefully they listen to the criticism on any of these products that they're releasing.
Yeah.
Couple more rapid fire topics from them though, right? So they're releasing a 49-inch super duper ultra mega wide monitor, as you call it. We've seen a lot of those already, so it's like, cool. It's cool. It's a FreeSync monitor. It's big, whatever. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen any G-Sync monitors of that size yet. That's probably because the G-Sync module probably doesn't support those kinds of resolutions right now or something of the sort. So, and then they're also releasing a bunch of AX routers that are Asus branded rather than ROG branded. They'll be better for a business or home environment and less of a gamery look, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lee and Lee did some interesting things, and by interesting things, mostly one thing. They released quite a few cases. They did finally show off the Air version of their PCO11, not the dynamic, but the Air version. I can't remember the name of it for some reason.
And more importantly, they showed off a Razer version.
And they showed off a Razer version of the PCO11 dynamic. The Air version is pretty good looking, though. It looks like it's going to have great airflow. It's got really interesting fins on the front. I really like it. It's still designed by Der Bauer, or in conjunction with Der Bauer. It's really cool. They released several other cases that we've kind of seen before at some other conventions, and nothing that was a super big note. They just quite a few things, but they did release an RGB 24-pin cable.
I love this.
This is really cool. If you hate RGB, don't buy it. Stop complaining.
Or if you hate RGB, buy it and set it to one color and get over yourself.
Yes. Oh man, the RGB,
the RGB hate right now is unreal. Like,
I'm not a huge RGB fan, right? I hate the people that hate RGB more than I hate RGB. Because it's like, guys, it's just options. It's just choice. There's no downside to it other than cost, and there's products that don't have it.
Yeah. And ideally, like,
and especially
when it comes to, like, a custom cable or fans or, anything that can be used a lot longer than just your base hardware.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you want something that you can easily swap the color scheme, whether it's straight up RGB or it's something like NUC 2 where you can change the accents on certain of their things. But just like anything that you can easily switch the color on without having to buy a full new product.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's better value oriented for those customers, and you don't have to worry about paint or anything like that. So, yeah, an RGB cable, though.
Yes.
So, basically, it's RGB tubes on top of white sleeved 24-pin cables because you can't actually make the cable RGB. That's not
yet.
Well, what they could potentially do is, with a fiber optic design, have the sleeve be the RGB part and just have it be like a solid color on the inside so that it blocks out the black wires, right? But for now, this is what they have. It's really cool. Basically, you've got RGB lights at the bottom, and I think it's just the bottom side of the cables that shine up through it. It looks really cool. It's still an early prototype.
Very early prototype. Like all of the boards. So you might see like YouTubers have hands-on with these. It was all hand-built. Literally like hand soldered
and everything, yeah.
It's using Molex for power. It's kind of a ridiculous little setup, but it's a very early prototype. It's just really cool to see this.
It is. And, I even, like, it's not very bright, which is a little bit bothersome in some ways. Like, I mean, I don't prefer bright stuff.
I was about to say, what are you talking about?
But I'm saying for the RGB community, like, in the daylight, it's pretty dim. Especially if you have a case that has, like, bright white lights around it to light up the inside of the case and you're looking through a tinted panel. I could see this being dark, but hopefully it's still bright enough when it comes out that it looks just like almost like a chain. You have a different color on your cable, right? Which is pretty cool. So this is probably the most unique, amazing thing that Lee & Lee showed off. I didn't see anything incredible from them, although forgive us if we missed something in that department. There was a lot of news. So Noctua showed off a lot of stuff. A couple of them we're going to talk about a little more significantly, but most of it's just part of a rapid fire section stuff. So first off, they showed off more of their their NFA12 25 millimeter, so that's the times 25 thick fans, which is pretty cool. Those have been around for a couple months. They've shown great performance. They tend to be they're really good all-rounders. They're really good on radiators. They're really good as case fans. They provide better airflow and better static pressure at lower noise levels. Now, keep in mind, like, the NF-F12 can still provide better static pressure on like the highest end, the highest amount of static pressure at the highest RPMs that they'll run, and like the NFS12 series still has the highest airflow at their maximum RPM, but this has a much better middle ground. They're going to be releasing a 140 millimeter variant. They showed that off, but it probably won't come out until next year sometime because they have to put more development into it. So, pretty cool. But you can buy the 120 on Amazon right now. For some reason, some news sites are reporting that this is a brand new product. It's not. This has been around a couple months. But my question is, where's the Chromax version, guys? I want to replace all my case fans with these, but I can't change to brown.
Why not?
We had this conversation.
Yes, we did.
So anyway, but they're still really good though. And they actually did like specific testing where these fans in some cases might actually be in open air a little bit louder for the same airflow and pressure than their other series. But then when you smack it against a radiator or put it in a case with a dust filter and some hard drives, the noise level's lower versus them. So they did really significant testing on these. Now, from what I understand, the decibel rating specifications that they have for them are still open air specifications to keep everything controlled. But the idea is these are quieter, but not only are they quieter, something Noctua really focused on with this new NFA 12 by 25 is the frequency of output. So not only is it quieter, or in some situations, sometimes even a little bit louder, it's much more pleasant to the ears, so you don't notice it as much. And that is something that I have not seen any fan company other than Noctua, maybe Noise Blocker, I'm not sure if they do that, really put into studying is how does this sound to the human ear? Because you get fans that are rated at a specific decibel level. I've had this happen, and it's like, but they're not quiet. They're annoying because of the frequency of the output of the motor and everything. So that's pretty interesting. Really excited to see these. When they do release a Chromax version, I will replace all my case fans with that because if it helps me drop 2 degrees Celsius, it's worth it in my opinion on a system that has so much heat output. So just to notify everybody, we have some thunderstorms rolling in. So if you guys hear big background booms, we apologize.
I don't.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize. So more Noctua news. They were really killing it at Computex this year, honestly. They released a ton of stuff. Really impressed with them. And they were the only company ignoring RGB, which was interesting. But kind of makes sense. Maybe they'll release RGB stuff at some point. They're probably putting more R&D into it, if they are. But anyway, so the Chromax line of fans, like I mentioned earlier, I want to see Chromax of the A12 by 25. The Chromax line of fans is, they've been just really nice color code, or the Chromax lineup of products, I should say, are just better color-coded products, so they're not using the Noctua brown and tan and stuff. They're instead just color-coded, and you can do like some customization onto them, like in terms of like the anti-vibration pads for fans and stuff like that. Well, they're bringing that to their CPU coolers. What this means, kind of interesting, is it doesn't mean you have interchangeable colors on the CPU coolers themselves. They have had some attachments for that kind of stuff for a while, but what it means is you get a Chromax fan with the CPU cooler, and the CPU cooler is a matte black cooler, or mostly matte black. Really interesting. I actually really like this idea. The silver coolers look good in some instances, but black looks better in my opinion, and I've always wanted like a Be Quiet, for example, has their black coolers that are really nice. And when I was going air cooling, I would have gone with them specifically for that, for Threadripper, if they had a Threadripper version, which they did release at Computex, but it's too late now, guys. I don't need an air cooler. But anyway, so I'm really glad they're doing this. This is a really cool thing. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Now, let's see here. They also are releasing a Redux version of one of their heat sinks and potentially more in the future. The Redux version of their NH-U12 cooler. It's a 120 millimeter single stack cooler. They're going to be doing some other stuff, doing some stuff to it to reduce costs. The Redux line is all about how can we sell this for a more reasonable price instead of the best performance. So they might be removing like a heat pipe. They're gray. They're not using solder on the fins and stuff like that for them. They're pressing everything together. And they're also going to have an optional Redux line of the covers for their heat sinks. So they'll be basic gray covers that just cover up the heat pipes. A little bit better looks, but really cheap. The goal for this one is to come into stores around $40. They said sub $40 technically. Which is really cool, actually, because that's only a little bit more than your other generic tower coolers out there, and this is going to perform a lot better. Performance is basically on par with the higher-end models. Now, they're probably a little more delicate in terms of breaking them, potentially, and stuff like that, so I'd say be careful with them if you end up getting one, but it could be a great replacement for something like a Hybrid 212 Evo and stuff like that. Now a couple more rapid fire stuff from them. This one really important to me in particular, the NF-A12x15. That's the 15 millimeter version of that fan. It's a 120 millimeter fan, 15 millimeters thick. Is coming in Chromax. It's a really, really good fan, and they've only had it in brown for a while. It's the best 15 millimeter fan on the market. Nothing else really even comes close to it, as far as I've been able to find. And it will allow in really space restricted areas to potentially do push pull on a radiator. That's what I'll be using it for, or just other space restricted areas. Like if you're one of those people with a case that has potentially fan mounts on the outside of your drive cages before your GPU, you could fit a bigger GPU and still put a fan in there potentially. So these are cool that they're coming to Chromax. They showed off some there, meaning they are definitely happening. There's also, they're bringing several more fans to the Chromax lineup. The NF-A20, the NF-A14, the NF-A12x25 was reported by many people to be coming to, I saw like 3 or 4 outlets, I think, saying that that's going to be getting the Chromax treatment, but I could not find any video footage of any of them or pictures of any of the NF-A12x25 in Chromax variants. So maybe a Noctua rep told them that, or maybe that's false, so keep that in mind for that little bit there. And then the NF-A9 and the NF-A8 are also definitely coming to Chromax, so that's pretty exciting. So there's an NH-U12 update. It has 37% more surface area, so it's just a thicker heatsink. It's still compatible with pretty much all your RAM and stuff like that. It comes with the NF-A12x25mm fan, which is really interesting. Good fan, makes more sense for heat sinks, so it's understanding that it's coming with that. It performs very similar to some of their dual, like 150 millimeter heat sinks, the dual stack ones like the NH-G15 and stuff like that, which is really impressive for a smaller unit. It's a little more expensive actually than the NH-G15, but it performs about the same in a smaller form factor, so it'll fit in more cases, more RAM compatibility and stuff like that. There's the NH-D15 update. It has 7 instead of 6 heat pipes. That's it, but should perform a little better, a little bit more TDP dissipation, because there's a lot of fins there, but if you can't move the heat to the fins, it doesn't matter. There's the NH-U14, which is a updated version of that, 30% more surface area, just thicker heatsink, and 7 heat pipes instead of the 6. So the NH-U14 and D15 have always been basically the same part, just one is 1 stack, the other is 2 stacks of fins. So most of their other coolers have been updated just to have slightly better performance. That's simple as that. And then they also have some new custom coolers for LGA 3647. There's a bunch of them that are going to be server based, so it's literally just a heat sink, and it mounts on that, and then you have the server fans blowing air through the blade, through the chassis. But they also have some that mount specifically to LGA 3647 that are like full size coolers and stuff like that. Some of these could potentially be getting used with Intel's really high core count CPUs for desktops if they release more than just the 28 core.
Yeah.
I imagine even at stock clocks, these big heat sinks might have trouble cooling the 28 core, so
yeah,
we'll see. Okay, that's it for Noctua, though. Jumping into Seagate, this was interesting release. Did you see much about this?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I told you to buy it.
You told me to buy it. That's right. You messaged me and you were like, hey, you should buy this drive. Seagate released, or announced at least, a 14 terabyte Exos drive. Exos series is their enterprise level drives. They're really high end, really high performance, really high reliability, also quite a bit more expensive. But they promise a consumer one is coming in the future. They said in the coming quarters. So probably, maybe not this year, early next year. Maybe CES they'll show it off, which will be really cool. Probably won't be coming in the Barracuda form factor. I didn't get any confirmation on that. I guess it's probably going to show up in the Iron Wolf consumer form factor for NASA's and stuff like that. Barracuda is designed to perform a little better, and they're also not quite as reliable and stuff like that. So it uses TDMR technology, which is something that Seagate's invested in. It's two-dimensional magnetic recording. Basically, it increases platter aerial density by about 10%.
Yeah.
That's how they're able to do that on 8 platters in these helium-filled drives, is by using that new technology to attempt to fit a little bit more space on there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Seagate, I didn't really see anything else from them, but this was definitely cool. So, Rivet/Killer Networking.
Oh,
Something
yeah,
pretty
I
cool.
really like this. So they announced something called Extend technology for their...
XTEND.
Yeah, for their killer wireless devices. So essentially it's pretty straightforward in what it sounds like. You can use your, desktop, laptop, whatever that has killer wireless networking to extend the range of your wireless router.
It's pretty cool tech. I like the idea behind it for sure. My concern, so they promise that it's not going to hurt like performance on the gaming side and stuff in terms of the machine that's doing the broadcasting. They did say that if you're using your desktop as a wireless extension, so your router's over there, your desktop's performance will not be affected due to network prioritization and stuff like that, which is cool. But my concern is I think we might actually see some latency changes on anything that's connected to one of the extend units. So if somebody takes their laptop and they're far away, but your desktop's in between, and your desktop's the extend thing, they might see some increased ping times. They definitely will.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, I'm hoping it's not very significant. I'm hoping we see 2 milliseconds increase or something like that. But, it depends on how the networking system's flowing through the desktop. I imagine with this, it doesn't have anything to do with your CPU, and so nothing on your internal system will affect it. So in that sense, it'll probably only be a few milliseconds difference, which isn't a big deal.
Yeah,
but
for me, it's like ultimately what this comes down to is like, if it's a serious problem for you, buy something to deal with it. Thunder's getting pretty intense.
That is shaking the house.
A little bit.
We don't get that here very frequently.
No.
Not thunder like that. Wow. Okay.
Not in June.
Not in June especially.
So yeah, essentially it comes down to...
too?
Yeah. For me, it comes down to like, if you really need it, buy something else, but this is just a nice little add-on.
Yeah, it's a nice thing that comes with stuff if you don't necessarily need network expansion, but it could be helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, you should go with a mesh network if it'd be a problem if you didn't have this, like if your computer got turned off and then all of a sudden your network is down in a different area of the house, right? But it's still an interesting way to do some expansion on the network. I think the biggest thing will just be, say you have a router and it covers your whole house, but say you have a gigabit internet and you can only get 100 down in the corner of the house. Having this in the middle might help that be bumped up to half gigabit or something. Yeah. So it's useful. All I ask is, Killer, can you please get your driver stability figured out? I've owned so many products with Killer networking in them, and it has problems all the time. All the time.
Own one more and maybe it'll work.
Maybe.
You just haven't bought enough.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I just haven't bought enough stuff.
Yeah.
So just please, you keep implementing amazing software features. You have great hardware. You have great performance. You have great prices. Just fix your driver stability. I've had problems with so much. Okay, so G-Skill did some interesting things.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yeah, so they released some memory. We wouldn't have ever expected that from G-Skill, so that was pretty impressive.
G-Skill released memory?
Yeah, isn't that kind of weird? I don't get it. They make keyboards and stuff, but I didn't know they made memory.
I'm questioning my entire life now.
Yeah. So anyway, G-Skill's a major memory manufacturer. Everybody knows about them. They make some of the best memory in the market. I'd say they're Corsair's biggest competitor in terms of high-end desktop memory. A lot of the other brands are just not very competitive.
And they found a way to charge more.
They did. They found
a couple.
They found several ways to charge more. So this main one that we're talking about here is their crystal style RGB shroud that they have. They're calling it their Royal RGB Trident Z memory.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree, but I think it's the most gorgeous RGB on memory I've ever seen.
I think it works really well for some builds. I don't think it would work for everything.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably true.
If you're going for a very clean build, I don't think that this really works for that because...
Okay, that's true. But then you might not even want lights at all. Or just a single color, maybe. Yeah. Maybe, but yeah. I get what you mean. It's very flashy.
If you're going for like a, very clean build and then you don't have your RGB on rainbow, but you have it set to specific colors.
Yeah, that could, And this is very, it looks like a crystal that the RGB is coming through. So it shines everywhere. And one of the main things that they said they focused on wasn't just the look of it itself, but the shapes that it makes inside your case and, or on your wall if it's like an open system. Yeah. And they're really bright, by the way. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if you're looking at like $800 to $1,000 for a 32 gig kit, especially in today's market. Maybe when RAM prices come down, if they come down, you might see like $500 to $600 for a kit like this for 32 gigs. But yeah, they're also advertising it should have high frequencies. I didn't see any specifics on the frequencies. I don't think it's going to be their 5 gigahertz stuff, which we'll talk about in a moment. But it still looks very impressive and very exciting. I'm excited to see this stuff. Yeah. This is really cool. So a couple other quick things from G-Skill. They released DDR4 5066 megahertz. If I remember correctly, the cast latency was 21, so it wasn't great cast latency. But just the idea of being able to push memory clock speeds that high is just absolutely ridiculous. I love the idea of it. So this is an actual kit of 5066 megahertz memory. Very, very excited for this, actually. I think this is really cool. That means it'll probably have an XMP profile that goes up that high and stuff. Really cool. I doubt it'll work on AMD stuff, but whatever.
Man, what are they going to be able to do with DDR5?
That's the question. Yeah, and it's like, where's the?
Can they get some like 10 gigahertz kits?
Yeah, I know. It's just ridiculous how far they're pushing this. So then there's also a DDR4 4800 megahertz kit. This is really impressive to me because it's running at cast latency 17, and that's only a little bit slower than the 5000 megahertz stuff. Really impressive kit, and so this should be coming out really soon as well. Seasonic did something really cool. Yeah. This is the main piece of news from Seasonic. Obviously, like I said, we can't cover everything in this, but, there's cases and stuff like that came out from them. But the coolest thing that we personally saw was their cable management backplane. Yes. This is really cool.
Can every company do this, please?
I wish. And you have to work with case manufacturers to do it. That's part of why this works. Is Silverstone makes their power supplies and they make their cases, so this works really good together. This is really cool.
Corsair? I expect this in 6 months.
I know. I expect Corsair needs to do this. They're one of the best companies to do this.
They have no excuses not to.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. So what it is basically you have a big back plane that goes in the cable management area of your case, and then you have one cable that comes from your power supply that's fairly short that plugs into the bottom of this back plane. The back plane then has split outs for your different connectors. So like up towards the middle left, it'll have a split out that is for your 24 pin. Yeah. And that will route around your motherboard. And so you get shorter cables, but it really cleans up cable management because you literally just have this thing here, and then you have these cables coming out. Yeah. And obviously, we'll show you some pictures of that.
No having to force and bundle a bunch of cables under the power supply tray. Yeah. No having to
strap down everything.
Spend a bunch of time cable managing and strapping down things. Yes. It's
clean. Yes. It's just clean. It takes a lot less work.
It's gorgeous.
This idea blew my mind. When I saw this, I was like, what?
Now we just need one with RGB.
Well, I mean, actually, that would look for the cases that have tempered glass side panels on the back. That looked great. This would, in fact, in my opinion, Seasonic's doing the thing that makes tempered glass side panels on the cable management side actually useful and actually a potentially good-looking thing. Yes. Instead of just, how can we increase the price of this? Double the amount of glass on it. More on that later.
Now,
guys.
What we need is for them to work with Lee and Lee.
Yeah.
Full RGB cables coming out of this thing.
Yes, which would be a lot easier to do because if you only have these short cables. You don't have the LEDs like way down because the cable's too long. They'll be dim.
And then on top of that, they could have the controller built into this
instead of some weird PCB thing or something, and then just have one 4-pin header on the bottom of that for digital RGB control. Guys, I hope you're watching. because that'd be a great idea. And especially because, again, with the Lian Li stuff, you couldn't have a cable this long with their stuff because there's only the LEDs on one side. You'd have no light.
Yeah,
by the
it's
time
just
it gets
an
to the other
extension.
side. Yeah.
And so if you just plug it directly into this thing, it's essentially the same length.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be so cool.
Good idea. EVGA released quite a few things. So they released I wanted to touch on this a little bit more detail. They released a 2,000 watt power supply, 80 plus gold. It's part of their G Plus series, so it's a little bit more budget oriented because we know they showed off a 2,200 watt a while back. It has 10 PCIe graphics card cables. Each of them, from my understanding, are 6 plus 2 pins, so up to 8 pins.
So it's a mining
power supply, right? Or potentially, if you have quad GPUs, you have a workstation with 4 GPUs that each need 2 power connectors, and then your motherboard also needs a power connector. You have 8 right there from the GPUs. You need at least one more for your motherboard, potentially one more for something else. Who knows? Maybe a different PCIe card or something.
Yeah.
So pretty impressive. It's massive and heavy as you would expect for a 2,000 watt unit. Now, something I want to touch on with these really high wattage power supplies that I think a lot of reviewers are missing and a lot of article companies are missing and not talking about this aspect is here in the US, your standard outlet is obviously 120 volts AC or 110 or whatever you want to call it, but it's around 110 volt AC power, 16 amps on the circuit breaker. That's the most common for a US household. That can give you about 1,800 watts of power usage pulled from that. And of course, this is a 2,000 watt delivery power supply, meaning it can probably pull in the realm of 2,300 watts from the wall. You cannot get that delivered by a standard 16 amp circuit. You need a 20 amp circuit or multiple 16 amp circuits. And from what I understand, this only has one power cable in the back. So you need a 20 amp circuit. You can't run this off a 16 amp unless you had some weird kind of load balancing splitter.
Yeah.
Now, a long time ago, the first 2,000 watt power supply, they had a box outside the case and then cables that went into a fake power supply inside your case. And those had 2 separate plugs. So you can run them to 2 separate 16 amp outlets. This does not. So you need to get a 20 amp installed to run this, guys. Kind of ridiculous. And realistically, you need a 20 amp for your PC and then a 16 amp for all your components because we're seeing monitors that can pull close to 500 watts now. The power consumption of stuff's getting ridiculous, realistically. Despite all the improvements in power consumption, with all the RGBs and crap, power consumption is getting ridiculous. So they also released their Supernova I think it's their Supernova.
It's just Super G7.
Oh, is it really just Super? Oh, Super G7 1,000 watt PSU.
Yeah.
Smallest 1,000 watt in the world, right?
Yes.
It's cool.
Yeah, essentially they just worked on some very essentially custom components for in general smaller power supplies.
Okay.
And it's Japanese capacitors.
It is
it's
really
all high
short.
quality equipment.
Wow.
Yeah. It's let me see platinum and gold options. Let me see if this has the size. It does not.
Yeah, it doesn't say, but they're really short. We'll get a picture of that up on there because that's really impressive. I really like this. I think it'll be especially good for extremely high performance like MATX and ATX, more small form factor, not necessarily ITX builds, but just small builds that might need crazy amounts of power.
They are using a 40% smaller transformer and SMT type MOSFETs to assist with this. And then there was some other design decisions made for thermals and efficiency.
Pretty impressive, honestly. I like it.
And that's also part of why it's not going lower than gold as far as this goes, because they need it to be efficient.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to have too much heat output in there, and you're not going to be able to cool the thing with a smaller fan. So another really cool thing that EVGA did, although I have some problems with it now that I actually read into it a little bit more, and I'll explain why. So EVGA is doing stress testing for built into their UEFI. So you'll be able to run an overclock on your CPU and then stress test it in the UEFI. Really cool idea, and it's still cool despite my problem I have with it that I'll mention in a second, where you don't have to boot into Windows to see if you're stable. You can get at least a rough estimation of how stable you are in your UEFI directly, which is really good for several reasons. First off, it's time savings. Second off, it saves you from potential data corruption.
Yeah.
I've lost all my tabs before from a crash. which usually with Chrome you can get back, but if you can't, it's really frustrating, and it still sucks.
Reference for everyone, he keeps like 1 billion tabs open at a time.
I generally have 70 to 80 tabs open with like 8 different windows.
Yeah, so he's a very dumb example.
I hate you. A very intense user of Chrome, and so, but like even for somebody that has 15 tabs open, it's still a frustration to lose your stuff, and so this is really cool, but my problem with it is it's using what they claim is a Prime 95 like workload. For stress testing and overclock, I'm highly against running Prime 95. Now I'll have to see how they actually do it, because if it's designed to be a short-term stress test, then I'm cool with it. Prime 95 is the way to go.
It looked like,
and
from
it looked like
I
it's
saw, it was
potentially a short term, yeah. If it's a long term stress test, you don't long term with Prime 95, and I can get into a lot more detail in that in another video. So if you guys are frustrated and think I'm an idiot and I'm wrong, I will make a dedicated video explaining to you why. Let me know in the comments. But basically, to sum things up simply, you're gonna inherently limit your max overclock, because the temperatures on Prime 95 are loads higher than you'll see in any real-world use case, even Blender, Premiere Pro, whatever. And so this, if it's a quick workload, that's cool, because just like Intel Burn Test, which is actually technically slightly more complicated and slightly higher heat output than Prime 95, it's running full LinPack supercomputer benchmark.
Yeah.
It does it in brief increments. It does it in like 15-second increments, so your temperatures will go really high, but then it gives it a break, so you don't usually damage anything with it. If this is more similar to that, this is great. It's like, oh, okay, system didn't lock up after a 4-minute stress test in here. Now I boot into Windows and I run like an X264 encoding
that's
test.
To me the vibe that I got from it was that it was designed to be something that you more so just run for a little bit to make sure it's generally stable and you're not going to have major issues.
Yeah.
And then you go into Windows and you do your actual testing.
Then at that point, you run like a long-term benchmark for best stability, like an overnight benchmark, but realistically, just a really heavy benchmark for a couple of hours is usually enough to determine if you're stable or not. Especially, I've actually noticed with overclocking AMD's Ryzen parts, I've noticed determining whether something is stable or not stable takes less time. Because like on some of my older Intel parts, like my 4790K, I could run a benchmark and sometimes 8 hours in it would fail, and then I know I'm not stable.
Yeah.
I haven't had that happen with any AMD parts.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that every motherboard should have something like this for just like a quick test.
Yeah.
I think that should be a standard feature. And it's nice to see EVGA, who's generally been behind.
Yeah, their BIOS, the UEFIs have not been amazing. They've been okay. But
and it still looks terrible in like early 2000s gamery.
Yeah,
design-wise.
It looks very,
feature-wise, I'm glad to see that they're finally implementing some useful features.
And that's what's more important in the UEFI in the end.
And on top of that, it runs at proper refresh rate.
Yes, that was so nice. And proper resolution.
Yeah.
That's really nice. That's really exciting. So, it's a cool thing. I think EVGA, you've got something going here. Last bit of EVGA news, they released some more SFX Supernova power supplies. They have the highest wattage SFX power supply, at least that I know of in the market right now, with a 650 watt. This is great for your ultra compact systems that can't even use an ATX power supply. They've got to use something a little bit smaller. They also have a 550 watt and a 450 watt. They're all 80 plus gold rated. RoCap did quite a few things that are of questionable decision. I don't think this was a good idea. So first off, they released their Titan Switch. It's, from my understanding, basically it's very similar to an MX Brown, or very similar to like the Cherry MX Speed switches. It's not anything. I don't like companies making custom switches for the purpose of making a custom switch. It's dumb. If somebody else in the market already makes something close, just do it. When Logitech released the Roamer Gs, it made sense because at the time they were the quickest, lowest actuation force and some of the lightest touch key switches out there. But when you release something,
and the other reason it made sense was that when you break your keycaps, you get to buy a new Logitech keycap.
Well, except also they did make it so you're less likely to break keycaps on it. So they still use their cheaper, thinner keycaps, but they don't break as easy. But more on keycaps in a moment, thanks to Rocket. But anyway, or Rocat. This is so anyway. It's 1.8 millimeter actuation force. They're very similar to an MX Brown, whatever. But they released their keyboards that have these are the Vulcan keyboards. They have the Vulcan, a Vulcan 80, which is a blue only version and no dedicated media controls. And then there's the Vulcan 100 and 120, which are they have dedicated media keys and they're RGB. The Vulcan 120 also has a detachable wrist rest. The keycaps on these are very thin keycaps that sit above the key. So you have the stem comes out, and I'll get some pictures of this, and the keycap sits on top like a plate. Now, I think the looks from certain angles on these actually look kind of good. It depends. That's objective, of course.
Yeah, I don't like it at all.
Yeah, like I know you hate the looks. I think it looks like you've got like these glowing rocks under your keycaps, which look kind of cool. But maybe it's too flashy for me personally. But I can see why some people might like it, right? But the main issue is having keycaps that are super thin on the top. How likely are those to break? They're ABS keycaps.
Yeah.
They're probably going to break. Now, the switches at least can use cherry keycaps, although I don't know how well they'd fit on top of these switches because of the way the switch is designed, right? Yeah, I don't know if you can really fit a cherry switch over that. I don't personally like these. I think they're going to fall apart really easy. We'll see with testing over time. Maybe Rocat has done enough work to make these not break. Maybe they're well-engineered. Maybe they're ABS or something like that. But the first thing when I saw this was those keycaps are going to fall apart. So we'll see, I guess. So, guys, we're going to jump into some Cooler Master news. There's quite a bit of stuff from them. Some of it will be rapid fire, but there's something I wanted to touch on first. So they released their C700M case. It's very similar to their C700P. Few design changes. One really cool thing, I think, is the GPU can mount vertically and then at an angle. So I'll show some pictures, but basically the GPU takes up as much space as possible. But I mean, if somebody really likes the idea of a full tower, like they want to have more cable management room and stuff, but they don't want it to look completely empty with just a motherboard and GPU, this is a really good design. I do like that aspect of it. So it's pretty cool. They have a mesh option for the front panel, which is really cool. Or you can do, I think it's a piece of glass, or it might be a piece of plastic, but it's a transparent thing in the front if you want that instead. It looks like a fairly good option on top of the C700P, because the C700P had quite a few issues in my opinion. It was really funky looking. It was a full tower that covered up like 85% of the entire thing, so you couldn't see much. It just meh. Now this was really cool. They're hybrid closed loop coolers. Remember these? So the thermoelectric coolers on these, TEC, built into a CLC, a closed loop cooler, an all-in-one cooler, whatever you want to call them, uses the Peltier effect to help lower temperatures below ambient, which is something we haven't been able to see any form of water cooling do, because laws of physics, right?
Yeah.
So it cools the liquid inside the system in a radiator that has all of the thermoelectric system in it. And it's capable, in theory, of cooling a 300-watt TDP. I don't really like TDP advertisements, though, because technically my radiator, which takes up less space than this, claims it can dissipate over 500 watts TDP. So it's like, I take that with a grain of salt, but that's about double what you see, or close to double what you see of a lot of closed-loop coolers. It will use a lot of power, though.
Yeah.
This cooler is going to suck about 150 watts of power. So you're going to need more power. Bigger power supplies are just becoming an actually useful thing again, which is kind of crazy. Because for the longest time, it was like, unless you were doing quad GPUs, you didn't need more than like an 850 to 1,000 watt.
Back in the good old days.
Back in the good old days. And then before that, it made sense to have 1,600 watts. Now we're going back in that direction. But anyway, it's going to be launching in Q3. They haven't completely finalized everything about the design, but pretty quick here. It looks pretty cool. So they also released the Master Case H500 and the H500M. The H500 is the lowest end in their H500 series. It's pretty basic. It's just plastic or mesh in the front panel. There's no glass or anything like that on the front. I think the side was glass. It doesn't really have much RGB. It has a little bit, but not a lot. Nothing really impressive. It's more budget-oriented, but considering how good the H500P mesh was, this case might be a really good option for a more budget-oriented build. Could be a good competitor, potentially against some Fantech stuff.
Yeah.
Then there was the H500M, which is the highest end in their series, and this one pissed me off. So they made a few tweaks, but the main tweak that I noticed with this case was, versus the H500P mesh, is they made the back panel tempered glass. So it just costs more. So yeah, this frustrates me a little bit, honestly. I don't like the idea of manufacturers slapping a glass panel on the other side of the case, on the cable management side, unless there's a good reason for it, which so far there hasn't been any other than Silverstone's if they make it RGB, or even just the looks of cleaning it up, right? This is it's just increasing the cost of it. And it's like $50 more or something like that for this case, $30 more. You're basically just paying for tempered glass. Yeah. It's really dumb. So Anyway, there's also the Masterbox MB511 and MB520. They're budget-oriented cases. The MB511 is air focus, whereas the MB520 is a little bit more looks focus. Other than that, they're basically the same case. There's also the Masterbox MB530P. Has a glass front, but the front is pretty deep looking from where the fans are, so I think quite a bit of air can come through what appears to be the side filtered area, which is pretty good. They seem to be listening to the industry's criticism and actually fixing airflow, which is something that's really important for companies to focus on because a lot of them haven't been. So I'm really glad that they're doing that. Let's see here. It looks like it could be a good P400 series competitor, potentially, if it's not too expensive. It looks like it's more budget oriented. So,
that's starting to actually kind of get into which I really like, a crowded and competitive space for that price range.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, it's awesome though. So also Cooler Master released thin mechanical keyboards. These are pretty interesting. So they're super thin mechanical keyboards. I don't think that's a huge deal because it's kind of a nice thing to see, I guess, in some ways. But they have flat keycaps, which is a little bit weird. And by that, I don't mean super thin keycaps. They're pretty thin. They're chiclet style. But they're chiclet style. They're completely flat. They don't have any curvature or anything to feel on them, which is interesting. You don't usually see that on desktop keyboards too much. And there's the CK620 is a 60%, there's a CK630, which is 10 keyless, and the CK640, which is a full-size keyboard. From what I understand, they have pretty good feedback. I didn't see anybody comparing them to MX switches. I imagine they're pretty similar to either reds or browns, something like that. So, and then there's the SL600M, which is a silent optimized case from them. It uses a chimney cooling design, basically meaning it has big fans in the front and the bottom, but no exhaust fans. The case is designed to be a positive pressure-oriented case where the air flows upwards and out of the case. I think it's a pretty good design because that keeps your intake and exhaust far enough away from each other. It should help move the air away and not recirculate the hot air. So I think it might actually be a really good case. So I'm excited for that. And it's got the I/O on the front of it. Lights up when you wave your hand in front of it. You can also have it set up so that you wave your hand in front of it to bring your PC out of sleep mode. So if you put yours into sleep mode ever, you just wave at your PC.
Why can't I have a Qualcomm chip that just runs in the background to keep my PC from going into sleep mode?
Because you can just tell Windows to not put your PC in sleep mode.
But I want it to be in a lower power state. Literally just a Qualcomm chip that handles keeping things in...
It'd have to be a weird form of hibernation.
Oh,
but yeah. I mean, that's an
essentially the x86 chip goes into hibernation, while the Qualcomm chip keeps the tasks in a slightly more active.
That'd be really hard to do the handoff between two.
I know. You'd probably have to have the Qualcomm chip built into the motherboard for one.
Well, yeah. Plus, you'd have to also have,
and you'd have to have motherboard. You'd have to have specific
really good emulation for x64 stuff because you're doing a handoff. You can't just change the applications. I can't think of what that's...
So what you're saying is NVIDIA should do it. Because NVIDIA on the Switch has good support for the Switch dev kit makes it really easy to port an x86 game to the Switch. They clearly have something that makes it run really well, really easily.
But that's porting it. I'm saying I don't know if you can do it live. Here's a live x64 application.
Game. I'm talking just having it in a suspended state that's easier to
but a suspended state, in order to keep that suspended state,
but that's the thing is that it doesn't need to run well in that suspended state.
No, but what I'm saying
is literally just keeping
you can't turn the process off.
I know.
Is what I'm saying. And that's the hard part, I think.
Yeah.
For that. But that's an interesting idea. I'm sure somebody could maybe figure it out. So Corsair, they did quite a few things, but the main thing that we wanted to focus on is their new Crystal 280X case. Now, they also have a non-RGB version that's black, but this one is white. The main one is white, the Crystal series. Lots of RGB on it. The black one does apparently it doesn't come with RGB, although the pictures all show RGB fans, so I don't know, who knows. But it's a nice dual-chamber case. I really do like it. I think we need a bigger one, though. I love the idea of dual-chamber box series cases, especially ones just having that extra space to fit where your power supply goes, but also cable management and stuff is really nice to help clean things up and make working with cables easier. Because something I'm running into with having so many accessories in my Enthoo Evolve is having troubles managing the massive amount of cables that I have on the back side panel now.
Yeah.
This would help with that a lot, in my opinion. So I hope they release some bigger ones. Not necessarily like full tower, but like mid-towers.
Yeah.
So. All right, guys, so we're going to jump into our rapid fire only section. So this is stuff we're not going to be going into much detail. The most detail we'll be going into is one Fantex case, and it's still not a ton. This is all just really pretty basic stuff that we saw some companies release that we thought were interesting. But
Interesting enough to talk about, not interesting enough to spend a lot of time on.
yeah, it's not a 32-core CPU,
Yeah.
you know. So, this one's interesting. Fantex. They released a modification to their N3 Evolve. This is the N3 Evolve X. It's a pretty good-looking case. It looks very similar. There's not a ton of changes at first glance, but it claims to have like 4 times better airflow. There's a little bit better cutouts in terms of where the air is supposed to come in, and I think the front panel's moved away a little further, as well as the top panel's a little thicker to allow more airflow. The side panels are sealed airtight with like rubber, which the glass side panels. Now, this is actually a reason to put glass on both sides. It's much easier to get that seal on a glass piece, and that's supposed to also help air leakage and dust management, and should help direct the air in the direction that we want it to go. On the top exhaust, there's a really cool mid plate that you can put in. So basically, if you have like instead of a 360 millimeter rad, if you're using like a 280 or a 240 or a 120, you can put this cover to cover up the other sections, so your hot air doesn't go up, hit the top of the case, which is still semi-restrictive in terms of exhaust, and just circulate back into the system. It forces that air out of the top of the case, which is good. And then it also has a second system that can be mounted in the top, upside down, an ITX system above the ATX system. Now this will block some of your radiator usage and block potentially some air cooler space and stuff like that. It's cool to see them adding that into it, though. It stores up to 9 SSDs on the backside with these hinged covers that cover up a bunch of cables and have SSDs on it, and then you shut them. Pretty nice there. It's a great design overall. I think there's good improvements, but one of my concerns, there's a lot of choice, which is good with the case, but somebody that really wanted to max out this case, right, like a high-end ITX system, a high-end ATX workstation and stuff like that, I think they're going to run into serious issues with being able to physically fit all the cables on the backside, especially with the fact that you have 9 SSDs on the backside with plastic covers. That limits your space more, and from what I understand, it's not any wider.
Oh, it's not?
I don't think. If it is, if they'd made it a little bit wider, then that solves that. That wouldn't be a problem. They literally could just do little metal extensions and extend the poles for the side panels. So maybe it's fine. So hopefully they learned and figured that out, because otherwise, like, just one system, in my opinion, is already becoming a struggle to fit all the cables in there. This would be ridiculous.
Yeah, it also supports 8 3.5-inch hard drives.
Yeah, which is the same as the original. So I think they're all in the same spots, is my guess. Yeah. So, okay, Vertigear.
Yeah, they announced an RGB cherry.
Oh, no, I spelled that wrong, didn't I?
Did. They announced an RGB chair.
Yes. Now, there's one special thing. It's wireless. Most of the RGB chairs, and by most I mean the only one out there, has a wire running to it.
Which is dumb.
Is dumb. You could trip over it. You could pull on it with your chair and potentially pull your computer off your desk. So this is really cool. It uses a USB dongle to communicate with NZXT's CAM software, which I can appreciate because that's already RGB software that exists. NZXT, please fix CAM, though. It still has problems. We still don't have a remote monitoring.
Hey,
it still has glitches.
It could have been Chroma.
I mean, this is true.
Chroma software is like malware.
Yeah. At least it functions. At least CAM functions now. And it doesn't usually crash, but it still has some weird quirks. Yeah. And the remote monitoring that they promised a year and a half ago still hasn't come out.
And at least it doesn't try and install itself when Windows is still installing.
Yeah, that's the creepiest thing. Windows isn't even done installing, and Razer's software will attempt to install. Yeah. Really weird. $400 chair. One of my things is this looks like one of their more mid-range chairs, other than the RGB aspect. It might not have very high weight capacity, so it might only be rated to 180. Now, realistically, with those ones that are rated to 180, you can a lot of times fit up, somebody up to like 230 pounds in them, and it won't break it or anything.
Yeah.
But it just means it might not have as good longevity because the piston isn't built for that and stuff like that. Yeah, let's see. Does it actually have a rating? Maybe it does. Should be in there.
Max load 400 pounds.
Oh, max load. Never mind. It's their higher end model.
180 kilograms, yeah.
Wow. Well, I still couldn't use it, though.
It also uses coffee fiber.
If it smells like coffee, I want it.
You'd buy it and mount it above you so that the coffee scent...
Yeah, like upside down on the ceiling and just a fan blowing across it.
So you have lights on your roof and coffee coming to you.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Oh, God.
The stuff we come up with.
I know, we're geniuses on this show. We really
so
are.
Clev announced some things.
Yeah, this was pretty cool.
RGB memory.
Finally.
Yeah.
Now, Clev is a subsidiary of SK Hynix, in case you guys didn't know, so you probably haven't really heard of them. They're not huge in the memory market right now. They've mostly focused on, like, budget memory and stuff. Finally, some RGB stuff looks pretty good. I think they did a pretty decent job with it. But something I really like is they came out with the first RGB M.2 SSD. Now, it's slightly larger, but it's not at least a 22110. It's still a 2280 SSD.
Intel.
Thank you, Intel, for being idiots. So this is really cool. It's using SK Hynix's 3D TLC NAND. I mean, not anything crazy that you would expect. It's the normal high-end stuff. No word on performance yet because nobody's had it in their hands to actually test, but it looks like it might actually have pretty solid performance. And what's really nice is the LEDs don't look insanely bright, and they have a really, really thick coated diffuser on them that I think should help it look more like you're changing the color of your SSD rather than you're just shining lights everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the direction I want a lot of RGB stuff to go, is rather than just shiny lights, do things where you have really good diffusers like inside the plastic of a fan to help it look like you're changing the color of your product. And of course it's going to glow a little, it's light, but this is a good implementation, one of the better ones that I've seen. So.
Yeah. And then in other RGB SSD news, HyperX announced SATA-based RGB SSD. It looks a bit better than Teams, but it still looks kind of meh.
Yeah, the RGB SSDs, I want to see somebody just come up, like, I'd like to see Samsung release one, where it's just the Samsung logo's carved out, and then the rest of the surface is one big diffuser for RGB.
Yeah.
And then it has, like, some zones
I know what they could do. They could have a little notch at the top, and then have the rest of it so it looks like a phone.
I would like that. That would be hilarious.
And then they keep releasing their phones without notches.
And then ROG comes out with one that's literally a screen. Cool stuff, I guess.
ROG, do it.
Do it! We have great ideas.
I'm not joking. An OLED?
Actually, an OLED on an SSD could be really useful.
I would rather that than the power supply.
Yeah, because you could mount... There's a lot of cases that show those off on the side, and that could look really good.
Yeah.
I'd like that. I'd pay an extra $100 for that. I mean, I wouldn't personally, but I'm saying if I wanted that, I'd pay an extra $100 for it.
We keep giving these companies suggestions. We need to get a cut of this.
I know. Nobody listens to us anyway, though. That's the problem.
These
companies would make so much more money if they just listened to this show and nobody else's.
Deepcool announced some AIOs. They have RGB. Fits TR4, but doesn't really have full coverage.
It's still better coverage than the circular Asetek mount ones, though. So good on that. Good on them for that, but still not a full coverage block.
Yeah, and the pricing is pretty good.
Yeah, $110 for a 240mm, $130 for a 280mm. Both include RGB, including the fans. So
yeah.
Like, they're pretty... I mean, the CLC market's getting really competitive. I remember when CLCs like this, that didn't even have RGB fans, were, in the realm of $180.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty cool to see.
Interesting choice for a laptop. So, it's a $1,000 gaming laptop. And now, with where the market's at, you'd think $1,000 gaming laptop, okay, it's probably got, like, a 1060 Max Q if they're going for, like, a budget build. That's kind of where things have gone. Except, no, they're going straight for the build quality and saying kind of screw it to the specs. It starts out with a 1050 for $1,000.
For $1,000.
1050, but you're getting higher build quality.
That's interesting. That's actually interesting. If you need a machine that you only game on occasionally, but you need something for, like, school, this could potentially be good. But at that point,
they have thin lights that are fairly good build quality for $1,000 now.
Yes, but this is going to have better performance, and this is still going to be a better price, because I have a 1050 in my XPS here. This is an $1,800 machine.
I'm talking something like ZenBook line, not the Pro, but like regular, like
yes, but a lot of them aren't going to have a 1050 in them, right? And so I kind of like this. It's a little too show-offy though for one that's focused on premium design,
Yeah.
But maybe for a student it could be good.
Weight-wise though, it's pretty good. It's only 3.9 pounds.
Oh, that's actually really light for a gaming
machine.
If you
compare
is it a 15-inch?
Yes.
Okay.
If you compare it to something like the Acer Nitro, which is a lot cheaper but a lot worse build quality, that one's 5.9 pounds.
Okay. Wow. So that's impressive. Yeah, it does look really nice in terms of the quality. It looks like good production. Like I said, I think it'd be good for maybe students. Probably not for business professionals and stuff. For a student that maybe wants to game in between classes or something like that. Could work for that.
So, yeah, an interesting, just kind of different lineup.
Yeah, I like seeing something different, even if it's not good.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? This was funny.
49-inch, all-in-one PC, so like a double ultra-wide with a 1060.
What bothers me about this is the specs, not the idea of it, because the 49-inch monitors are getting more popular.
What bothers me is any all-in-one that is not like a low-end machine.
That is or isn't a low-end machine.
I don't like any high-end all-in-one.
How come? Just because you can't replace components
Yes,
very easily?
you can't replace components.
There's a few of them you kind of
And
can.
I had mentioned this to you before, but if they had HDMI pass-through directly to the display...
Which hopefully this one does. It's a proof of concept, so we don't even know.
That would be one thing, because then, worst-case scenario, when the hardware stops being viable for what you're using it for, you have another option of still having it as a monitor.
Yeah.
But otherwise, in my opinion, you are far better off buying a monitor, and then if you really need something that is more compact and more kind of all together, then getting something like a smaller...
Well, you could even get like the NUC that has the Vega chip in it, right? So it's running Intel and Vega. It's running Kaby Lake G. Those have VESA mounts on the NUC. You can put it on the back of the monitor.
Who was it that had a smaller form factor desktop that I think had a 1060 in it that was also mountable? It was bigger than
it might have been Zotac.
Yes,
I think
Zotac's
they did it.
boxes that have actual GPUs in them.
Yeah. So you can get them and they mount to the VESA mount on the
make
monitor.
more sense to me.
I can agree with that, because it ends up being about the same price, but you can more easily interchange stuff, and you don't have to worry about the monitor potentially going outdated, because monitor tech doesn't change as fast as internal componentry.
Yeah.
I think my biggest problem, though, with this, honestly, though, is I don't like the specs. Like, I feel like for a 49-inch, you would expect that the reasoning behind doing that would be that they can fit higher-end components in it. Now, since this is just a proof of concept, maybe they can, because you think it'd be like, oh, it has more room in it. So you could fit, like, a 1080 Ti and, like, an 8700K with some overclocking room and, like, liquid cooling radiators in it or something, right? So, I don't know. I was a little disappointed when I saw the specs of a 7700 and a 1060. It's like, meh. But, interesting proof of concept. So for our last topic here, guys, Alienware. They released
a headset and a mouse, RGB lights, and buttons.
Yeah. The headset looks pretty cool, actually. I like Alienware's style for these things. I think they look unique. They definitely fit the Alienware theme. They're not as outgoing and crazy, bold, angular as ROG, but they're also not formal. They're kind of in that middle, and I like that. There's a market segment for it. They haven't released a headset in something like, I think like 8 years or something like that, or almost 10 years. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that. They released some cheap mice and stuff, so they're maybe getting into the higher-end peripherals again, which is kind of cool. Nothing particularly special about it, though.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it for our Computex Roundup, though, guys. Of course, there's going to be some stuff we missed, and we apologize. We can't cover everything. This would be a 6-hour show at that point. We covered as much as we possibly could fit in this, and as much news as we saw on all the big topics, of course. Be sure to check out all our links in the description. We've got links down to our website there, which we've been posting some articles about Computex stuff, so there might be some things that you see here shortly after this video goes live of stuff that, you know, that we maybe didn't even talk about in this video.
On top of that, if you, because we're not doing WordCast fully right now, if you wanted to see some coverage of like WWDC, there's an article already on that. There will be some stuff on E3 as well.
We might do another video roundup for E3 a week or two after this one, potentially. Depends. These videos, of course, take a ton of work to put together because there's so much editing that goes into these.
The editing, the planning the doc, then the recording. It's like it's a multiple hour step at minimum for each thing.
Yeah, we probably spent somewhere in the realm of 8 to 12 hours getting this ready, plus the hours of filming. So, but yeah, like I said, of course, check out the links in the description. Don't forget to subscribe. You know, if you're interested in leaving us a contribution on Patreon, that'd be super cool. We have a link down there for that. Leave a comment and let us know what you think.
What is your favorite and least favorite product? That's personally my thing.
That's a question.
For me, obviously,
excluding AMD's Threadripper stuff, because that is going to be what a lot of people pick. Excluding that, more unique stuff like cases and stuff. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, like for me, you know, I mean, I already mentioned that like two of my favorites were the ZenBook Pro and the console gaming monitor.
Yes, and the ROG foam was really cool.
Yeah.
So.
And then for me, like least favorite was that 49-inch ultra wide all-in-one. I just don't have any interest in that being a product.
I get you. I get that.
So
yeah, well, I think that's it, guys. So we'll see you all in the next one. Got a couple cool videos coming for you guys soon, so we're gonna get to work on filming those right now.